And welcome to tonight's regular council meeting. Thank you everyone for attending. We are having some heating issues in here, so it's not usually this cold, but maybe this will help us move through the agenda a little bit quicker. So we'll see how that goes. Okay. So, council, I'm looking for approval of the agenda, please, as it's provided along with the supplementary materials in the yellow pages. Moved by Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor Ray. Any questions? All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. We have here our meeting minutes. Staff just advised me that the regular council minutes from October the 10th are actually a draft version and not the finalized version. So the finalized version would be posted, will be posted tomorrow. But I think it's just in terms of formatting and things like that is why it looks the way it does, but we could still look to adopt the minutes from that meeting, unless there's any questions or corrections. So I'll look for a motion to adopt, please. Moved from Councillor Pearson and seconded by Councillor Loggins. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And then also from October the 23rd, a motion to adopt. Moved by Councillor Ray and seconded by Councillor Pearson. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. And I'll just back up that when we approve the agenda, I didn't read this out, probably should have. It's written here that we've moved the public hearing, all three of them, forward following adoption of the minutes. Is the mover and seconder okay with that? Is that council's understanding as it's written? Okay. Great. So our next item is a recommendation from the question to our corporate officer. So the public hearing, though, will follow this item 4. We'll deal with the committee of the whole recommendation and then do the public hearings. Is that correct?
Yes, that's
okay.
Correct.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Sorry, I'm a bit under the weather, so I just need supplies for that. Thank you. Okay, so from the November 6th committee of the whole, council deliberated and reviewed our various service agreements that we have with community groups. So we have one. We can do these in part in each one. So the first one is that the committee of the whole recommend to council that the community service agreement for the Sooke Community Association be renewed for a period of 5 years in the amount of $28,000 plus an annual 2% increase, and that this amount be included in the 2018 financial plan. Move recommendation by Councillor Parkinson and seconded by Councillor Loggins. Any discussion on that recommendation? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Next is the committee of the whole recommend to council that the community service agreement for the Sooke Region Historical Society be renewed for a period of 5 years in the amount of $23,650 for 2018, $26,123 for 2019, plus an annual 2% increase for each subsequent year, and that this amount be included in the 2018 financial plan. Moved by Councillor Parkinson and seconded by Councillor Pearson. Any discussion or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Next is that the committee of the whole recommend to council that community service agreement for the Sooke Region Tourism Association be renewed for a period of 5 years in the amount of $23,000 plus an annual 2% increase, and that this amount be included in the 2018 financial plan. Moved by Councillor Parkinson and seconded by Councillor Loggins. Questions? Councillor Ray, please.
Yes, a comment. I was part of the discussions in the Council of 2011 to 2014 around funding both CERTA and the Sooke Chamber of Commerce. And at the time, I had agreed to support it on an interim amount of 3 years. And that has now cycled into 6, and we're now looking at a 7th. I will not be supporting the motion. I think that, as I had said back in 2012, as businesses in the community, that I felt that after a couple of years of some seed money to help them move forward, that shouldn't be at the cost of the taxpayer, so I will not be supporting the motion.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Ray. Other comments from members of council? Councillor Pearson, or Casper, sorry.
Yeah, one of the things that I've commented on in the past is that there's no financial support from the Juan de Fuca electoral area for this function or service, and some of the businesses that participate are not within the municipality of Sooke. So, I would have hoped that over the years that there would have been other funding sources, not only just the taxpayers of Sooke, but also from the community where some of the other businesses are listed on the site, especially the website covering the Sooke Regional Tourism Association.
Thank you. Councillor Pearson?
Yes, and at our the Committee of the Whole, where we actually came forward with these recommendations, it's interesting to note that the CERTA group is sort of a re-energized group. They put a very good presentation on, and of particular note is that they are partnering with the town of Sydney right now, promoting the Marine Circle route, and I think that the work that they're doing merits the investment in this from our point, because we actually do benefit from it. So anyways, I'll be supporting this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson. Councillor Parkinson, then Loggins.
And I too will be supporting it. During the presentation, they showed us the advertisement that's on air for everyone to see, and they also are working with Victoria and Sydney and Cowichan. And so the three small groups put in $3,000 for the project, while Victoria put in $30,000. So we definitely benefit by what they're doing, and we do reap the benefits.
Thank you, Councillor Parkinson. Councillor Loggins?
Thank you. They do receive funding from other sources, and the reason they partner is so that the province provides the funding from a different standpoint. They're doing excellent work that we do not have the capacity to do, and it's still important for our region and for our employees in Sooke. So I'll be supporting the motion.
Okay, and I do agree with the sentiment around the table by those that were at the Committee of the Whole that received the presentation, and I too will be supporting the agreement. So seeing nothing further, I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Ray is opposed. Thank you. And lastly, we have that the Committee of the Whole recommend to Council that community service agreement for the Sooke Region Community Health Network be renewed for a period of 5 years in the amount of $22,500 plus a 2% annual increase, and that this amount also be included in the 2018 financial plan. Moved by Councillor Loggins and seconded by Councillor Parkinson. Any comments or questions on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? And that's also carried unanimously. Okay, thank you very much, Council. Okay, so now we move into our public hearings. And first on the list would be 5229 Sooke Road. And I will turn this over to staff, please.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of Council. The application before you tonight is to rezone a portion of 5229 Sooke Road, as shown highlighted and hatched on the screen, from rural RU2 to community facility P2 for the purpose of operating a proposed daycare facility to accommodate 37 to 42 children. Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure have no objections to the rezoning proposal and have issued a commercial access permit for the proposed daycare to access from Highway 14. The ministry will be monitoring the highway with respect to the proposed use. The owner has clarified that they will be providing carpool options and that traffic into the property for the daycare will be staggered between the hours of 7 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. and 3 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. There will be no traffic between 9:30 a.m. and 3 p.m. There is also a transit stop adjacent to the property. The owner has provided a parking plan for 20 parking spaces which meets the parking requirements within the Sooke zoning bylaw. The owner has also been made aware of the building permit requirements for a daycare with this proposed capacity. Here's a zoning map of the subject property and the surrounding properties. 5229 Sooke Road is 1.73 hectares, and the Galloping Goose Trail cuts through the middle of the property. The upper portion of the property, located between Highway 14 and the Galloping Goose, is subject to the rezoning application. The remaining portion of the property, which is located south of the Galloping Goose and adjacent to the Sooke Basin, will maintain the RU2 zone. The owner has been working with the ministry to ensure that their proposed daycare will have safe access onto the highway. The ministry has issued an access permit and will continue to work with the owner to monitor the access and ensure that safety is the number one priority. After a review of the OCP and the strategic plan, this application is supportable, and the owner is in attendance tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from members of council? Okay, so I can lead us right into our public hearing. And I just have this statement to be read, please. So this public hearing is being held pursuant to the Local Government Act. At this public hearing, any person who believes that their interest in property is affected by the proposed bylaw will be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard or to present written submissions respecting matters contained in the bylaw that are the subject of this hearing. Copies of written submissions received to date are available. It is important that all who speak at this hearing restrict their remarks to matters contained in the bylaw, and it is my responsibility as chair of this hearing to ensure that all remarks are so restricted. For those of you who wish to speak at the appropriate time, commence your address to council by clearly stating your name and home address. Then you may give us the benefit of your views concerning the proposed bylaw. Submissions must be received before or during the public hearing in order to be considered by council. Members of council may, if they so wish, ask questions of you following your presentation or submission. However, the main function of council members this evening is to listen to the views of the public. It is not the function of council at this public hearing to debate the merits of the proposed bylaw with individual citizens. Everyone who deems his or her interest in property to be affected shall be given the opportunity to be heard at this hearing. No one will be or should feel discouraged or prevented from making his or her views known. Please note that this hearing forms part of tonight's regular council meeting and as such is being video recorded. Videos and their contents, including any personal information disclosed during the public hearing, will be posted on the district's website. So on that note, I'd like to welcome anyone forward to speak on 5229 Sooke Road, please.
Eleanor's 5526 Sooke Road. I just want to say that, again, I really do not feel that this is a safe place to have this happening. You know, it's Stickleback. You can't have, they're not allowed a left-hand turn there. Living across from the gas station, I see frequently when the big truck, tanker truck turns left on there, the traffic is backed up past this location. And what we're talking about is traffic turning left on a curve, on a hill, into this location, and it's really not safe. I can't see how highways can even think it's safe. And when that happens, you're going to back up traffic even further up the road. Living on Sooke Road, I see that back up on a continual basis, and all it takes is somebody turning left. Now you may have 30 cars turning left or more, and it's nice to think that people are going to carpool, but there's no guarantee that there's going to be carpooling or that people will be using transit either. I just don't see this as a good location for that amount of traffic turning left. It's just not safe. And as noting the number of accidents that have been in that area in the 30 years we've lived there, I just feel it's not a very safe place to have this. I mean, it's a great idea, but I don't think the location is good for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Lures. Other comments from members of the public regarding 5229 Sooke Road? Call for a second time if there's any comments for 5229 Sooke Road. Okay. Sir, if you could please turn on the microphone. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Sifu Moonfist, 202-6591 Lincroft Road. And that exact stretch of road, the only thing that I can say that would be sort of okay about turning left there is I know the elevation, I know that exact piece of road very dearly, and as long as it is kept trimmed down at the road exposure brush area, then it has a very high visibility off to the left around that cement curve. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Sifu Moonfist. On a second time, a third and final time, I don't know if the applicant would like to add anything at this time. If so, please come forward.
There we go. Hi, Cindy Ross, owner of Almost Home Childcare. I'd like to thank you for your comments. First of all, we are very interested in providing quality childcare to Sooke, but not at the risk to anybody's safety. I want to make that first a priority. Many of my locations, I've got 6 in the city. We are in high traffic areas like we expressed to you last time. And our number one safety is getting everybody home safe. As far as the general access is concerned, our clients will be moving with traffic, turning right into our site, and turning right back out on their way into Victoria. On the return back into Sooke, they will begin, once again, they'll be moving with the bulk of traffic and turning left into our site across very little outgoing traffic at this time of day. When it comes time to re-enter the traffic flow with that final left-hand turn back into Sooke, we are planning on controlling and maintaining the vegetation sightlines along our 1,200 foot of access that we have been granted, like this gentleman has pointed out. There is a huge difference as far as safety is concerned with regards to visibility when entering or leaving this site. The Ministry of Highways and Infrastructure was very strict with regards to traffic and safety concerns with any type of this new development. And I can tell you that they were very thorough in their analysis when they visited our property the 2 to 3 times that we were with them as well. We've had many conversations involving several representatives from all levels of management within their department about how our business will look from a traffic and safety standpoint, and concluded that there is no immediate cause for concern with them. So we were at this time granted the commercial access point. We thank you for your consideration.
Okay, thank you. I just have a question, if you don't mind. Yeah. So in terms of the access permit that Highways has provided, you're
Right.
fully aware then that should they feel there to be concerns or complications that they could restrict it as a full right-in, right-out only?
Yes, we're aware, and they've
Okay.
made that very clear to us.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, and so just calling on the third time for any comments from members of the public here this evening. This is the final call. Okay, so on that note then, I close this public hearing. Council cannot receive any further comments on this, and I'll turn this back to Council then for your deliberations here. The recommendation would be then that Council to give third reading to the bylaw cited as zoning amendment bylaw number 680-600-43, 2017. Moved by Councillor Casper and seconded by Councillor Ray, I believe. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Parkinson is opposed. The motion's carried. Thank you. Okay, so that brings us to our next one, bylaw number 687, zoning amendment bylaw for 6599 Arranwood Drive. And I will turn this back to staff. And council, please note that within the yellow package that we've received, pages 3 to 29 are submissions from the public regarding this particular rezoning. Okay, over to staff. Thank you.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of Council. This evening's public hearing, we will be looking at a rezoning for 6599 Arranwood Road. This vacant 0.7 hectare subject property is located at the corner of Churchill Drive and Arranwood Drive, next to the established Alders and Woodland Creek neighborhoods. Woodland Creek. We'll do a little site tour with a few slides. The parcel is topographically flat, however, covered in grasses, invasive blackberry, and Scotch broom. There's a healthy stand of established fir trees that were planted as a Christmas tree farm, I believe, in the 90s, which are a unique natural asset to the site. The site's well connected to the District of Sooke Ponds Park Trail System and is generally quite pedestrian-oriented. And so the gist of the application is that the applicant is hoping to split zone from neighborhood commercial, which at this point the entire property is zoned as, to partially neighborhood commercial and partially multifamily 2. And the entire location is located within the sewer specified area. Principal uses that are permitted in this zone include apartment building, assisted living facility, duplex, cluster housing, as well as townhouses. And their home-based businesses are allowed on a limited basis. The adjacent zonings to the site include RM1, P1, some comprehensive development in R3. And here's a sketch of the proposed site plan, where you can see that the applicant is proposing basically 19 new units, where each one would have 2 parking stalls, one in the driveway and one in the garage, basically exceeding the parking requirement by half a space per unit. The applicant's also are required to provide an 8% amenity area for all residents to use. And the proposed units would be similar in design to the Alders neighborhood, which is just to the north. This is a few pictures of the Alders neighborhood. You can see their townhouses for the most part. And to keep the height in check, the applicant has agreed to impose, or is willing to impose, a Section 217 covenant restricting the building height to 12 meters or 3 stories. And this is a schedule of restrictions from the draft covenant. Basically, it's what comes out of the zoning bylaw at this point. So there has been some discussion about affordable housing, and as you know, our current policy requires 10% of all new multifamily and condominium units to be affordable housing as defined by our district. And then we would like to allow developers the flexibility to provide their required affordable housing in different forms, thus creating an affordable housing mix, such as secondary suites, condominium rental units, cash, or land in lieu. So in this instance, the applicant feels that by providing a varied mix of housing options between this application and then the subsequent one you'll be looking at, which is on the Churchill Road, that affordable housing requirements will be met. So having a diversity sort of crossing between the 2 lots. And just as a review, Development Services is supportive of this rezoning to permit the construction of height-restricted duplexes, triplexes, and townhouses only. The reduction in commercial land size is better suited to a true neighborhood commercial node as prescribed by the OCP, particularly in light of supporting commercial activity in the nearby town center. And lastly, the proposed zoning meets several goals and policies established in the OCP and provides an opportunity for affordable housing, infill development, and a diversity of housing forms within walking distance of the town center. Okay, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rice. Are there any questions from
And just
Council?
the applicant is here this evening if anyone has questions.
Okay, thank you very much. To Councillor Ray, please.
Yes, through your worship to staff. When you spoke about parking, is the driveway separate to the garage area? I know that was a discussion we had up on Melrick Place that we didn't want to end up in a situation where somebody was parked in a driveway and somebody couldn't get into a garage, so they parked on the road. So I just want to make sure that they have access for two vehicles.
So I think the way it's, I guess it depends on interpretation, but as long as there's space for a space within the garage and a space on the parcel behind that, that's considered two spaces. So we don't have to allow necessarily access for the garage separate from the additional space, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does, and I do have some concerns because parking always seems to rise to the top in terms of issues in these higher density areas. Thank you.
These can be design discussions.
Other comments or questions from members of council? Okay, so we'll move. Oh, Councillor Casper, please.
Just through you to staff, what is the approximate selling price of these units? Do they fit within CMHC guidelines and the affordable housing policy that the district has adopted, that based on a 20-year, 25-year mortgage, that no person will be paying more than 32% or 30% of their income if they fall within the average family income of Sooke, which is approximately, from what I understand, $76,000. Would those units be selling for that price, or would they be selling for considerably more?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Casper, I think that would be a question more appropriately asked to the applicant who is here tonight.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, just a question to staff or to our corporate officer. Can the applicant approach council outside? Like, does it have to wait till open the public hearing? But in terms of parking and the question raised by Councillor Casper, can the applicant address those first?
Yes, we are technically within the public hearing process, so it would be fine for council to ask the applicant to come up at this point.
Okay, would that be the will of council? I'm just saying that there's a couple of questions already that that maybe we can have them addressed ahead of inviting the public forward. Okay, if I could please ask the applicant to come forward, please. The first one expressed by Councillor Ray is just a concern about parking, and I agree with the councillor. If you have two vehicles and one's in the driveway, one's in the garage, the household has to make arrangements as to who leaves first in the morning, unless there's a design solution that would allow either vehicle to exit at any time without having to wake someone up, say. The second one was the one on Councillor Casper, just looking for the pricing and the affordable housing. It's something I struggle a bit with myself, is when things go to market, then it's up to the will of the market to determine what that price is, and that may put it out of reach in the affordability range. So if we could get some of that answered, thank you.
Yeah, I'm Blair Robertson. I'm a co-owner of Tatangi Properties, and we've been the developer of Woodland Creek neighborhood since we started in 2005. With respect to the two specific questions around parking, I mean, we've got a conceptual design that sort of falls back to what has the typical floor plan and design of a townhome site, which is that we have envisaged anyways, which is a enclosed parking spot in the garage and at least one spot in the behind the garage. So that's two spots, plus there's allowance for visitor parking within the design. So there's what we've shown is just a conceptual design to show a footprint, which are homes around 1,200 to 1,400 square feet. The Alders adjacent is around 1,600 to 1,700 square foot homes. So these are a bit smaller, and in trying to answer what will they go to market for, well, they're probably 2 to 3 years away from market. So I don't know. We're in an environment now where each time we do a construction budget, about 2 months later we have to revise it. So I wish I had a price point, but I really don't know. I mean, it's as far as dealing with more parking-related issues and design, that's something that we would put our mind to once we got to more detailed design. We have to go through a development permit process, an engineering process for a townhome site, so that would be something we address then.
Okay. Is there any follow-up from members of council at this time to the applicant? Councillor Loggins, please.
Thank you for your time and for coming out. I'm just curious. I'm not a developer, so I don't know how this works exactly, but do you not have a guesstimate or a range of a price that you're targeting based on your expenses?
You'd think I would, but I really haven't done the homework to determine for a 1,200 to 1,400 square foot townhome what the market's going to be right now. We know that by doing a smaller unit size, that's going to reduce construction costs. Every time you add square footage, it drives up the price. So that's why we're sort of aiming to get down to a very efficient design. We've become fairly efficient with building homes and delivering nicely designed homes, single-family homes. The adjacent Alders development was done by another builder, Stellar Homes. They developed the site. I think I could come back to staff with a better idea of what that, the pricing might look like. But again, we're 2 to 3 years out, and a lot of that's driven by cost and market. And on the cost side, it depends where we're at with materials, labor, engineering fees, those sort of things.
Okay. Yeah. Councillor Ray, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Quick question. We've received tonight a lot of response to your development, and one of the things that does jump at me in terms of the amount of density that's occurring in this area is a comment, and I'm sorry I missed the planner's comment on whether or not you were looking to actually build 3 floors.
Not for the townhomes, no.
Okay.
2-story.
Thank you.
If I might, I have a prepared backgrounder to give more context to what we're doing with density and between the 2 sites. We might cross lines into the other bylaw, but they sort of go hand in hand. So would it be helpful to provide that background at this time? Or?
Yep, I feel it would. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So just a bit of history. Our family company purchased the lands in the 80s, and we actually planted the Christmas trees there. I did in the 90s, and they've grown pretty well, some of them, that survived the successive Christmas harvests. I think we have a good reputation as a builder in the community. We've been innovative. We had the first geothermal subdivision in Sooke, and I think the only one. We actually had the first traffic circle in Sooke. And so you can blame that on us. The current zoning, Woodland Creek zoning plan, was approved in 2005, creating a new neighborhood that would introduce a variety of housing types connected by a network of road, pedestrian, park, and trail networks. The plan approved permitted approximately 225 housing units and a mixture of single-family, townhomes, plus an allowance for about 20,000 square feet of neighborhood commercial and with 20 apartments above in a mixed-use building. 28% of the site, so it was a 32-acre site, 28% of it was developed, is occupied by parks, trails, roads, sidewalks, and playgrounds. That's another innovative thing. At the time when the subdivision bylaw wasn't quite where it is now, we always exceeded the sidewalk width requirements to enable better pedestrian flow. So the purpose of this rezoning is to modify and redistribute the housing types approved in 2005 on the remaining 2 parcels of land while maintaining the overall mix of townhomes, single-family detached homes, and neighborhood commercial. With this rezoning, the overall density of the neighborhood will be reduced by about 20 units, and the commercial floor area will be also reduced. These changes, we believe, will help meet the evolving needs for housing in Sooke and are more reflective of the current housing demand. The residential density reduction involves the rezoning of 2325 Church Hill Road from a townhome zone of 56 units to a small lot single-family detached zone of approximately 35 lots. We propose that this subdivision lot road design will be similar in nature to Arranwood Lane, with similar house plans featuring some ranchers, master on the main floor plans, two-story family homes of approximately 1,300 to 2,000 square feet. And on some of the lots, we'll introduce plans with legal suites. Now, this is a new introduction to Woodland Creek, as there's very few homes that have been built with suites, only on those lots over 500 square meters, and in the past 4 years, we haven't built any homes with legal suites. Or illegal suites, so no suites at all. So this is a new introduction, and we would do it selectively based on the design of the subdivision. In each case of the single-family lots, each home will have at least one enclosed parking space. Some will have two, and there's typically room for 2 lots or 2 spots in the driveway because of the driveway width. On the second proposed rezoning, which is the one on the table at the moment, we're reducing the commercial zoned area of the lot and introducing an area of townhome zone land. So the original zoning proposed a mixed-use commercial building with approximately 20 apartments units above the commercial space. This was looking like a 3-story building. The proposed mix of townhomes and smaller commercial area we feel better fits with the nature of Woodland Creek community. The townhomes will be smaller in area, as I mentioned, than the Aldards, so they're about 1,200 to 1,400 square feet, and they'll have 2 parking spots, one enclosed and one in the driveway. The commercial building is planned as 2 stories with about a 6,000 square foot footprint. In each case, the zoning is the first step. The next step will be detailed design, at which point the form and character of the townhome project will be developed. And we'll put our mind to the detailed engineering, planning, and building requirements to address the road, pedestrian linkages, landscape design. Both the townhome project and the commercial project will require applications for and the approval of development permits by Sooke and single family. Sorry, I need some water. Thank you. And the single-family zone will require subdivision application and issuance of a preliminary layout approval. So happy to take any more questions.
Thank you very much for that background, Mr. Robertson. I think found it to be very helpful. Follow-up, Councillor Loggins, please.
Thank you. That was helpful. We received some concerns from neighboring people who own property in that area. And one of them, which we've heard a lot of in various areas of Sooke, is drainage, flooding, and it's kind of inevitable in a situation like that, especially with the dip that's around the property. So I'm just wondering how you plan on addressing that.
Well, it'll all go to engineering, but that site is serviced with a drain that connects to our stormwater management pond in the park, but all of the site would be designed to capture and keep all of the water that's surface water and anything caught in perimeter drains to go into that system.
Thank you. And I have a question for our fire chief, if I can do that now, or so through you to the fire chief. I was wondering if there were any issues for access in the surrounding neighborhood. I know you can't foresee what it might be in this area, but if you had any concerns or if there are current concerns in that area.
Good evening, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Loggins. As I mentioned in past meetings, there are some concerns in this type of neighborhood where we've driven our engine through and unable to get the doors open. This is due to the fact just because there's parking on both sides. I think the width is probably ideal at the initial part of the development, but there's been an increase of volume and more people parking on the street. and it comes to a point where we've had a couple incidents where we have had to relocate the engine in an alternate location away from the actual location a couple doors down because we can't get the doors open of the engine.
Thank you. And just a follow-up question to that is something, or perhaps just a comment, that may be something we need to address with our policies to ensure that there is additional space for when people are parking on the street, because if this can go through and we just start building communities where our fire trucks can't access the homes, that's very dangerous.
Did you want to add anything, Mr. Robertson?
No, I think, again, once we get into detailed design, all of that gets referred through the process. So we'll take our comments at that time and yeah.
Great. Thank you very much
Okay.
for attending and for the presentation. We appreciate that. Any other questions from council to staff before we enter the public hearing? Any comments? Seeing none? Okay, so we'll go into the public hearing, and there is the statement to read, for me to read. This public hearing is being held pursuant to the Local Government Act. At this public hearing, any person who believes that their interest in property is affected by the proposed bylaw will be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard and to present written submissions respecting matters contained in the bylaw that are the subject of this hearing. Copies of written submissions received to date are available. It is important that all who speak at this hearing restrict their remarks to matters contained in the bylaw, and it is my responsibility as chair of this hearing to ensure that all remarks are so restricted. For those of you who wish to speak at the appropriate time, please commence your address to council by clearly stating your name and address. Then you may give us the benefit of your views concerning the proposed bylaw. Submissions must be received before or during the public hearing in order to be considered by council. Members of council may, if they so wish, ask questions of you following your presentation or submission. However, the main function of council members this evening is to listen to the views of the public. It is not the function of council at this public hearing to debate the merits of the proposed bylaw with individual citizens. Everyone who deems his or her interest in property to be affected shall be given the opportunity to be heard at this hearing. No one will be or should feel discouraged or preventing from making his or her views known. Please note that this hearing forms part of tonight's regular council meeting and as such is being video recorded. Videos and their contents, including any personal information disclosed during the public hearing, will be posted on the district's website. So on that note, I'd like to welcome anyone forward, any members of the public forward, please, to speak on 6599 Arranwood Drive.
Not sure if this is already on. Excellent. I'm going to get water because I'm going to need it. My name is Katie McLaughlin. I am a resident of the Alders at 113-6591 Arranwood Drive. I am here today on behalf of my wife and I to express our concerns with the proposed rezoning and development applications submitted by Totangi Properties for the plot of land at 6599 Arranwood. We are residents of the complex and our units back directly onto this property. So we are actually one of the most significantly impacted residents in the Woodland Creek neighborhood. You have already heard from me in your package, but I felt it was really important to come here and actually present in front of my neighbors and make sure that our concerns are heard. So when our house came on the market in 2016, our one hesitation in buying it was the fact that it backed onto the vacant piece of land being discussed, which at the time and still is zoned as commercial. We did our due diligence and we contacted not only the District of Sooke, but also Totangi Properties at the time to find out what the plans were for this property. At the time, we were told in no uncertain terms that the zoning was commercial and that Totangi intended to build something that was suited to the area. And I believe the words were actually that it would have to attract people to the neighborhood and not detract from it. We were also told that regardless, our neighborhood would be consulted and would have a say in what would be built because they wanted to make sure it was supported by the community. We talked about coffee shops, corner stores, childcare centers. We did not talk about any or all of this, plus 19 townhouses and possible third-level apartments on top of a commercial. To date, no one's been consulted on the proposed development, and our strata has actually been offering to meet with Mr. Robertson since we first received our letters in May and received no response until recently when last Monday he met with one of our residents, which felt a little bit odd given the timing of tonight's hearing. We, like many other residents in our neighborhood, have a number of concerns, and I'll just kind of get to it. So pedestrian safety is first and foremost one of the most biggest concerns of our neighborhood. We have a number of kids in our community, upwards of 400 for trick-or-treating, and that's just for whoever answered the door. And we have 2 schools in our neighborhood. So in addition to this proposed development, we're also talking about across the street from our complex, single-family homes with, now we understand, some proposed additional suites. We also have another vacant piece of property adjacent to that will likely be townhouses. And when you add this to the 19 new homes, commercial building with retail, a parking lot, and possible apartments at 6599, you're looking at a significant increase in the volume of vehicles and pedestrians in our neighborhood. Right now, we have vehicles lined on our streets in the evenings and on the weekends due to a high number of vehicles and inadequate parking. We have no setbacks painted at curbs or crosswalks despite requests to the district to complete this work, which means vehicles can park right up against either. It makes visibility for pedestrians and drivers very poor, especially in the dark winter months, and makes two-way traffic along Arranwood Drive and Churchill Road virtually impossible at times. We are talking about a high-density development on the corner of a busy road with 2 residential neighborhoods. There also happens to be a school bus pickup and drop-off on that same corner. Increasing traffic and increasing the number of vehicles parking on the road will only add to the safety issues we're already facing. Factor in the speeders who often whip around our neighborhood or down Church Road and the drivers who repeatedly ignore the crosswalks, and you are building a perfect storm for an accident. In addition, the risk of fire spreading between units in a townhouse complex is always a concern. Currently, Tutangi is proposing that the new townhouse complex share a fence with our units. This increases the opportunity for fires to jump from one complex to another when backyards are only upwards of 4 meters in length. This is quite frankly unacceptable and preventable risk that could be mitigated by ensuring that there is some kind of easement between our complex and the new complex so we do not share a fence and are further apart. I'd like to also point out that right now there is no other townhouse complex in Sooke that does not provide some kind of easement between units and neighboring developments. To date, it has been a building standard that not only ensures there's some kind of fire barrier, but also provides safety, privacy, and aesthetic appeal for residents. Council approving a development that does not provide an easement would be setting a precedent for other builders and may put our unit at risk. While the new units have sprinklers or will have sprinklers to adhere to new fire codes, ours don't, and we need to make sure we have adequate fire barriers and easy access for firefighters. Privacy is, of course, also a concern for us. We purchased our home knowing that a small commercial building was likely to be developed on the property, and we were told that we'd have an opportunity to be consulted. We didn't know that we would be faced with the possibility of staring into the windows of new neighbors who would be less than 8 meters away from us. Had we known this, I can assure you we would not be here today because we wouldn't have purchased the home. There are a number of solutions that we would like to have considered in order to maintain a shred of privacy between units. These include requiring an easement between properties so we don't share a fence line and so that there is some piece of land between complexes. A little bit goes a long way in reducing noise and light pollution and maintaining privacy. Ensuring units are built in a staggered approach so that we aren't staring directly into bedroom windows of the units built behind us. Ensuring that the maximum height restrictions of all buildings in the new development is at 8 meters, which is in line with the height of our units, not 12, as Tutangi has requested. And providing adequate landscaping, such as trees, to help reduce over the long term the intrusiveness of other townhouse complex. An easement, as you're going to hear me say a couple of times, is a solution for a number of issues, including fire safety, and could easily be maintained through a 50-50 cost share between our strata and a new strata. We are also concerned about loiterers who could become an issue with commercial retail buildings. We already have some issues with theft, including a very recent incident a few days ago, and vandalism in our neighborhood, and we would like to ensure this development won't simply add to the problem. Irrigation and flooding has already been mentioned, so I will skip over that, but it is a concern. We had a similar issue happen on Townsend Road where flooding happened and homeowners were on the hook for about $5,000 per unit. And quite frankly, that's just an expense that would be a really significant financial hardship for my family and one that we shouldn't have to go through. So I would just ask if this is approved, that perimeter drainage and irrigation is a requirement. I won't go into that stuff. So in summary, while there are a number of other concerns like waste management, lack of parking, impact on value of our properties, rental concerns, maintenance costs for our strata, and much more, I'll leave it there in hopes that I've provided enough information to Council to reconsider this development as it's been proposed. believe that high-density development is completely out of place for this neighborhood and brings about safety concerns that should be a priority for council. This is a poorly planned project that focuses on a developer who would like to maximize profits, sorry Blair, on a 1.8 acre piece of property, and it doesn't add any value to our neighborhood, nor does it actually consider the impact on current and future residents and our investments, safety, or our privacy. We would prefer if it was either a commercial space or a residential space with adequate privacy, not both. Squeezing both in on this project seems out of touch with what we can handle in that neighborhood. So I just ask council to please do the right thing and put a pause on this request and development plan, address some of these concerns seriously, and make sure that Totangi has a realistic plan in place for this space that requires them to address some of these significant concerns. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. McLaughlin. I appreciate that, and for also providing us with the written document. Okay, I'd like to welcome any other members of the public forward, please.
My name is Graham Bartle. I live at 119 6598 Arranwood Drive. If you're looking at the map, it'll be the second one up, the middle one right in the bottom of the picture is our group. I want to speak in two capacities tonight because as the treasurer of the strata, we prepared a letter and some concerns that we wanted to address to you tonight. And as being an owner in that particular unit, which has some concerns all of its own, I want to address those too, if I may go ahead. Thank you. A letter is in your notes that has been drafted by the strata, and Katie, speaking a minute ago, addressed some of those things. I will pick up on a few of those comments because there are other members of the strata here tonight, and they will want to speak too. We are the only true back-to-back, door-to-door, window-to-window neighbors for this new development. Everybody else that has an interest lives across the street or up the road or downtown or someplace. We are living in the area, and there's a number of us have some things to say tonight. And I hope that we can clear up some issues and address some issues that need to be considered by a council of this nature on this kind of a situation. The first item on our list was about building density, and that is a concern to us. I note that in the record there is this comment that the Alders that we are living in is going to be a model for the new development. But there are very many characteristics in which this model doesn't translate. Mr. Robertson talked about the size of the units that we live in 1,600 or 1,700 square feet. The new units will be 1,200. They'll be pushed closer together and squeezed more tightly on the lot than we have. And yet, in spite of that, we have some problems to deal with. There was discussion earlier on about parking, and one car being on the driveway, the other car being in the garage, and who gets to shift the car on the driveway so that the car in the garage can get out. And the lane that goes down the center of the units has kind of been declared this is a no parking zone, even for residents, because wherever you park on that lot, you're stopping somebody else from backing out on the driveway opposite you. So this is an issue. So then you have to go out and park on the street and come back there and then move the car out of the garage and park it on the street, then pick up your car and put it back on the driveway, and then you're free to go to work or whatever you have to do. That's the practicality of this kind of arrangement, and it's not an easy one to deal with. We don't want cars sitting in the lanes because it becomes a hazard and you can't move out and you can't back out of a driveway because your neighbor is parked outside their lot. It really is, it might be a statistical remedy, but in practicality it's difficult. There are other reasons why people have more than 2 cars. Sometimes they bring a work truck home, or they have a work vehicle that they're driving, and they have a car and their wife has a car. And these issues all add to more cars on the street. We have one person in our unit that works in Duncan, another one that works out in Saanich. There is no public transport that can get these people to their place of work. They have to have a car. And so this adds to the problem. Parking, pedestrian safety, Katie talked about that in detail. I won't spend time on it. Fire safety is an issue. And one of the proposals that we are talking about here from the strata is that if there was a separation between these back-to-back buildings, it would sure clear up a lot of issues. We talked about landscaping and planting a tree. So which side of the fence should that be planted on? Because we only have 4 meters in the new development, and we probably have 5 or 6 on the other side of the development. And if we want a tree, we've got to grow one so that we can have some privacy because it grows up higher than the fence. But if it's our tree and the neighbor cuts the leaves off because they don't like it, or if it's their tree and we cut the leaves off because we don't like it, we're not any further ahead. If we could separate those 2 units and give access so that the fire truck could get in or fire men could get in, it would clear up an awful lot of issues. It would mean kind of shifting all of the building footprint over a little bit, I think, to provide that room, because there's not very much room behind these units. Another issue, in a sense, where the new building model based on the Alders really comes into question. And I said that I wanted to speak about the unit that we're in. The owner who lives next to me, you'll notice it if you can see the picture on the map again, that house is sitting broadside to the houses that back into it on the other side. So this person that lives in this house that's from front to back along this lot, and I calculated it about 90 feet. It was 11 fence sections of 8 feet each, so it's 90 feet, 30 yards from the grass frontage to her property to the back fence. And this is going to be, there is 2 on the picture that back into that, and the other one comes into the further up on the property. But it's a privacy issue. Her clearance between her house and the fence is 3 meters. The depth of the project on the other side is 4 meters. 7 meters, 21, 23 feet, somewhere in there, between her bedroom window and the neighbor's bedroom window. This is an issue that I think needs to be considered and addressed in this whole thing. Another one of the fire issues that has come to my attention, because I happen to live in the middle unit. If I go out and I have to take something from the back of the house to the front of the house, I either have to take it through the neighbor's yard or carry it through the house. If perchance a fire caught fire in the back of my unit, they would have to either come through the house or come through the thing. And if it was backed onto another property opposite it, we would have a problem for fire safety to deal with. So I draw that to your attention as well. There's another problem that's particular to our particular unit, and that is that if you see on the picture, there's a driveway that comes down our way and then accesses onto Churchill Drive one way and comes up to a fence at the other end. The planning on the other way seems to come down and open it so that there's an access there. But our property is private property, and the strata will be private property. And I wanted to be assured from this council and from the development that this is not going to be a public thoroughfare for people to come through all of the time. We have a gate there that pedestrians can come through and kids come through there all of the time. But I certainly don't want it to be a traffic issue. We like the trees too, Mr. Robertson. very, very good, and we've enjoyed watching those over the year. Please find a way to leave them there. I don't think there's anything much else that I want to raise here. I'd be welcome to answer any questions if I can. I should maybe make another comment about the privacy on this end unit and all of the others in general. Because at 20 feet, the distance from, well, probably across this entire room, it's possible to speak in a normal voice and to be heard on the other side. If you raise your voice, if there's domestic strife, if there's a fight going on next door, if they called out their friends for a barbecue and are having a real party going on, and it's 10:30 at night and you'd really like to settle down, but the party's still in progress, what do you do? And our solution as the strata, when we put this all together, was to say, what will help the situation is if we can put a little bit of separation between those units so they're not back to back on a common fence, but some way through there to separate those a little bit, to give access through, to provide some kind of space to grow some trees and put in a privacy barrier. A lot of these problems would go away. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bartle, and to the strata as well.
Thank you.
Okay, calling again for any public comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, councillors. I'm also owner at the Elders, Unit 105.
Could we have your name, sir?
Oh, Gregory Verano. The two speakers ahead of me pretty well summed up most of the valid points that are bothering us in regards to this. There's others too. For one, if you look at your supplement on page 17 of 29, you'll see a proposed drawing of an easement, the easement that we're talking about. Now, the scale is incorrect, but it just gives you an idea of what we're looking for between the two stratas. And that would really help alleviate a lot of the issues that we're facing right now as far as privacy is concerned, fire safety, there's access, aesthetics, landscaping. We don't have to share the fence with a new strata that might not have the budget to replace the fence if something did happen on our side. And like I will just reiterate, we're willing to share the costs of maintaining it 50-50. We're not looking for something really wide, but just wide enough as in one of your slides that you'll see between one of our walkways. Just keep going. We're getting there, right there. We're looking at maybe 2 meters, 4 feet, 5 feet, that's it, in between the two stratas. And I think that will alleviate a lot of the problems. Now, the difference between our properties and the properties that are proposed is our backyards are 7.8 meters in depth, close to 8 meters, which is about 20, 25 feet. These are going to be 12. So they're going to be really, really close. And if they want to go to 8 meters or 12 meters, they can. So our privacy is pretty well gone. And coming from the eastern Canada, I know that privacy is a big thing here in BC. I mean, it's really important. Landscaping, to see trees. I mean, to see the mountains. Just to breathe some fresh air in your backyard is a big thing here. And then me coming from an urban area, we're used to not having it. And so I understand it. Now that I live here, I really cherish this. Like I cherish this environment. And in the last 2-3 years that I've been here, I'm slowly watching it transform into like urban sprawl, so to speak. Is this houses upon houses upon houses, higher and higher each year? I can't, you see less and less of the landscape that makes Sooke what Sooke is. The other concern I have is the fir trees that are on this property. If you go to the slide. They actually hook up to one of the Sooke walkways that goes through our path, Callumwood, behind Callumwood, all the way down to Townsend. So it hooks up to that. But aesthetically, they're beautiful. And even in your own report, they say that it's an asset to the lot. And I would hate to see them be destroyed to put in townhomes. Because what would it cost to plant these trees individually? It's in the thousands of dollars. And it's just a waste, a shame to see that go. And if that did leave the neighborhood, it would really impact it because it's one of the aesthetic keys that makes the alders the alders. In my letter, I actually invited the council to come to the alders because out of all the townhouse complexes, it's unique. It's a one of a kind. It was the first. The streets are wide. It's well landscaped. I could have moved to Oak Bay. Why did I move to Sooke? This complex is beautiful. It's beautiful, and it would be sad to see it be degraded or degraded. You can't copy it. They've tried at Townsend twice. It's not the same. The streets are wide. It feels like Pleasantville in a sense, if you wanted to put it, and we don't want to lose that feeling. It's an asset to the community the way it is. We don't want to say no to building anything on the property. Tatangi has any right to build what they want, but we also think we have a right to maintain its beauty, tranquility, and keep it as an asset. Anything built beside it should be an asset to the community. As we're feeling it's more of a, once the house prices went up, let's get this rezoned. And not just once, let's get it rezoned for even more density before the first hearing was even put up. I mean, R1 zoning would be a fine for townhomes, and whatever wants to be, done to the commercial site, so be it. They can do what they want. But R1 density, single-family density, is what would be perfect for this proposal. They're doing it at one of the other sites that I have written down here. But I just want to keep it short, and that's it. An easement would really solve a lot of the problems. Parking is a huge problem. A lot of people, yes, you'll have a garage. Most people use it for storage. Have two cars. One car is always on the street. Not just in our townhouse, even in the single-family homes. It's just a reality of the way life is here in BC. We don't have basements, so we got to store stuff somewhere. It's in the garage. I'll just leave it at that. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Verano. Do I have other members of the public to speak to 6599 Arranwood Road?
Herb Haldane, 3118C, Otter Point Road. I guess my issue is a lot of what these people have said here, but more importantly, the consistencies that don't exist in this rezone application. I've helped on a couple rezones recently, and the affordable housing component comes into play, and clients were asked to pay $5,000 a door, and that was brought to me by email, and I have copies of both emails that I've got for both applications. Both times I said we would do a affordable housing unit at 30% of the average CMHC rate, yada yada. It was turned down. Staff went directly to the owners of the property, bypassing myself, asking for $5,000 a door, and they got $5,000 a door on all those. And then one was a rezone for single family, and the other one was a rezone for townhouse, and that was recent. In this application here, and I've looked at both of them, and I'll come back up again for the second one, if that's the case, but there's no mention of anything in there at all about any kind of monies changing hands. They talk about affordable housing components in there, and they also talk about it being done by covenant or housing agreement. Well, there's no housing agreement or covenant in here anywhere either. And if you look at, in the same package, you look at the Melrick Place one that's being done, and I'll give you, it says Sooke Affordable Social Housing does not provide direction on a recommended dollar amount, but it is, past developers have contributed between $500 and $15,000 per door. The provisions, rental suites, cash contributions toward affordable housing would be an affordable housing mix. So they ask for it in one application, they don't ask for it in either one of these two, and they ask for it in previous applications that I help people with. And in here, they talk about using suites as the affordable housing component, but that's done through a housing agreement, and then parking is done through covenant. So it was mentioned here about parking, an expectation of parking. There's Schedule A here in the Melrick Place application that talks that they want 2 parking stalls for every house, plus they want 1 for any additional suites, and for every off-street, they want off-street parking for every 2 residential lots created. So this is the expectation of a single-family subdivision, but there's no mention of any parking requirements for either one of these 2 applications coming for you tonight. And it's been brought up that parking's an issue, and it is an issue, and probably more so in this subdivision than most, because both schools empty out all the kids there every day in the morning. They both pick them up every day in the afternoon. Yet somehow we miss the fact that parking is a huge need here. We talk about it being a thoroughfare because it joins up with parks and other subdivisions that sit right next to it. So there's a whole bunch of need for street parking here. And as the one gentleman just said, everybody puts everything in the garage. So as Ebony brought up earlier, she said, does the parking go back to back? Is it garage and then a parking stall? Well, everybody's parking or putting all their stuff in the garage, so no, that parking will never be used for parking. And even if it was, how do you get out in the morning if your wife leaves before you, or vice versa or whatnot? So I think the 2 parking spaces that they provide in this is not near adequate enough. The road dedication should be wider, so on and so forth. And in the original application, when they asked for this big, huge commercial area, I mean, that was done by the same applicant in 2005. Where did all of a sudden need for all this commercial go? And as I understand it, there's commercial going just up the street on the corner of Wadham's Way. Commercial was expected by the applicant because we're in such need of commercial space. So either we need a commercial space or we're not in need of commercial space. And the inconsistencies here, basically, they're just ripe, and it doesn't make any sense. So if the applicant wants to make the people in the neighborhood feel like they're getting to be a part of this application, they should give them some of these things that they're expecting out of a bunch of the other applications that staff has already put forward in front of council previous times. So that I'll come back up again when we do the subdivision one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haldane.
My name is Chris Secord, Unit 115, and I'll be the broken record on this tonight. Which topic to pick? Hard to make any my own. The unit I live in, the back window is 22 feet to the fence. Privacy is a massive issue for me. I don't want to live for however long I'm going to live there with my blinds closed. I don't want to look into someone else's bedroom and vice versa, wake up in the morning and look at that directly. There are solutions, as brought up before, but I can't emphasize enough. And it happens to be that my unit is actually one of the furthest units from the fence. The rest of them that share that fence line are actually a couple meters closer. So even for me, if I feel that's very and it invades my privacy, certainly I can't imagine how they feel, and they're just that much closer. As brought up before with drainage, specifically, I was out walking the dogs this morning, and I've walked through this property a lot. By the time you get to the units of 111 and 113, the property actually drops, and it's visible just looking at the fence line. It just staggers down, staggers down. It probably drops about 18 inches. The surveyor was just out the other day, so they could tell you exactly. But perimeter drainage alone around a typical foundation will not solve this type of issue. There needs to be a deliberate drain line put right down that property line that will have to shed that water. With the clay base, over the years I've probably put like at least 5 or 6 layers of sandy soil mixed down, building my lawn up over the years to try to deal with this. There's nowhere to put drainage in my lawn to run it anywhere. I have nothing to tie into. I just really want to bring that up as a concern. Parking, I think one of the things that's sort of been looked over is if we do have this commercial site next to this area, that parking lot will be their parking lot. In Langford, where I lived before, there was a commercial space adjacent to the condo building, and it was an epic battle. The landlords or the company owners were then having battles with the strata trying to get the people not to overnight park in their parking lot. It's just a natural thing. There's a bunch of empty spaces. There's nowhere to park on Arranwood for these people. There's nowhere to park. Either they're going to go down Ackerman and park somewhere down the road, or they're going to come around Churchill Drive and walk up. I can't remember the name of the place. It's adjacent to the park area. But when I first moved in and while the place was under development, I parked there one day. I didn't get 12 hours without a written letter from those neighbors said, get the hell out of our street. We don't want you parking along there. You're blocking our view to the grass, to the trees, and all that sort of thing. So I think there's a bit of a complication on that side of the fence, too, with that commercial property. Access to our property is one thing. The general public likes our townhome complex, and because you can walk through the roadway, it's a common thoroughfare for people. And recently it seems to be such an accepted notion of people walking through here that they don't mind helping themselves to our front porch and any valuables that might be sitting out. And this has happened for years. This isn't just a recent thing. It just happened to be someone got it on camera. But the property line needs to be separated. The boundary is important. If there is a pathway through here, we're probably going to get people using that and maybe things will happen. But I'm certainly worried about sharing a fence line between two stratas. A fence line between two neighbors sometimes is like a classic battle. Who will deal with that fence? Who will repair it? So we might end up with some nice neighbors, but the kid kicks a ball, blows out the blows out the fence panels. And a simple thing can become a big problem to deal with when who owns it, who's responsible, who cares, and who doesn't care. And if there ends up being rentals in this unit, we have a couple rentals in ours, and we've had troubles with renters in our own townhome complex to the point of calling the police and what have you. So, there's the good and the bad. You just have to make sure that we try to plan for at least some buffer in there and account for all these things that have been brought up today. I know there's more sitting behind me here that are on this same bandwagon here. Again, I'm also supportive that, something has to be developed in this area. He has every right to do that. I just want to make sure that, our concerns are brought forward and certainly heard clearly, and people have spoken much more clearly than I am tonight. But that's what I'll say tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Sager. If I may call for a second time for any members of the public present on 6599 Arranwood, please.
Good evening. Unit 107, Derek Church. So, like some of the neighbors that have presented before me, my unit backs directly on to the place. We actually just purchased this year. We looked all around Saanich and Victoria and everywhere else, and we fell in love with Sooke. It's beautiful. And unlike what Langford seems to be turning into, it's reasonable. It isn't a high-density box on top of box, neighbors staring at neighbors over fences from their 2.5-foot wide backyards. We actually saw some places with that where they put down a strip of artificial turf and claimed, look, someplace for your pets outside. They claimed it was grass. It was green. We're willing to give them that, and we smiled, and we left as quickly as we could. So we came to Sooke, and we found this wonderful townhouse, Unit 107. There was this property beside it, zoned commercial, possible apartments on top. It showed it right in the pictures, and the sign's been up there for at least 10 years. We asked around, and everybody said, eventually it'll be a commercial zone with some apartments on top. We have a wonderful property. It's beautiful trees in the back, but we recognize the developer has that land. He stated their intentions. This is what's going to happen there at some point. Maybe it'll be next week. Maybe it'll be 5 years from now. But we bought expecting that that's what's going to happen. And then we found out about a month after we bought that that's not the case. There's an application for rezoning. We understand, again, the developer needs to make money. They want to provide for Sooke. I don't think this does that. I'm looking at what's happening here, and certainly my neighbors that have spoken tonight have touched on any of the issues that I could touch on far more eloquently than I can. But this is going from our strata, which everybody talks about. It's beautiful, and it is. Certainly, if you could walk around it, and I suspect many of your children did on Halloween, because when they said 400, my God, they weren't kidding. Our neighbors warned us. We didn't believe them, but my better half over there was wise, and she kept buying the cheap candy. I would call it an addiction, but boxes at Costco every week. We'd get another box, whatever was on sale. We went through it. It was amazing. Parents bring their kids to this neighborhood because it is, in fact, well developed. And I know part of the effort goes to the developer sitting over there. He did it. They created this incredible, wonderful place. It's got sidewalks. It's well spaced. The only big issue we have is parking right now. And that's been touched on before. And not to ask the dumb question, but when does a one-car garage with one pad in front of it count as 2 parking spots? I don't understand the math. My better half over there, she has a master's in math. She doesn't understand it either. She cannot come up with the algorithm that says that if I park 2 cars, one in front of another one, and I can't get the first one out, that counts as 2 spots. I know there's some places, some businesses that would love to use that parking model. Their customers wouldn't be happy, but boy, could they get a lot of cars on the lot if they could do that. These are not 2 parking spots. It's 1 parking spot with a garage that you can use for storage, because what else are you going to do? Are you going to do like Blair, where you pull 1 car out to the street, move the other car in 2, 3 times, 4 times a day? It just doesn't work. We have that problem at the Elders. It's probably one of the few setbacks that we have, is that you have to park down on the street, around on the street, and hope that there's a spot to park on the street. And as the gentleman from the fire department mentioned, I mean, I can't even imagine how he gets the engine through there. The man must be a magician sometimes with the amount of parking that gets done on both sides of the street. And right where this sits, you can't park on Church Road. So people are going to have to park on Arranwood, and they're going to crowd the area. I mean, we have people who park in front of the mailboxes because there's nothing left on the side streets. The developer mentioned in a few of the spots, or some of the other development that's happening tonight, the other rezoning application, that there would be some suites. Maybe not in the Arranwood area, in the Woodland Creek area, but I know that Steeplechase, which is just a road over, in that entire cul-de-sac area there, down and up the road, almost everything there has suites in the basement. And they actually have 1 2-car garages and 2 spots on the driveway. And the street there is also full because of the suites. So they're not 2 cars, they're not 3, 4 cars, they're 5 cars or 6 cars, and that bleeds over into the Arranwood area. I can see 19 units should mean at least 35 cars, of which you'll have spaces for 19, and nowhere else to park, anywhere, except to try and fit in with the spaces that aren't already there. I don't think the parking, I don't know how the math works out, how the garage and the space add up to 2 spots, because it's not, in any practical sense, matter of the word. And we came to Sooke because it's not Langford. It's not Victoria. Things seem to be well thought out here. It's a community area where you have nice views and trees and you're not boxes. And I believe what Greg mentioned, and they've done the research, this would be the first time in Sooke where you've allowed 2 townhouse developments to go back to back. No space, no divider in between, no parkway. And the density that implies, the density that increases. I mean, and it's also been mentioned, we have 1,600, 1,700 square feet. It's a good-sized home. These are 1,200. Is there going to be miniaturized versions of a good-sized home? I'm not quite seeing how that's going to work. It just seems to be an application to up the density. And with respect to the developer, because I know he's trying to offer you trade-offs, it seems we've gone from 20 apartments to 19 small townhouses. And maybe that's a trade-off. Maybe the fact that the other division's gone from 56 townhouses, I believe it was, down to 35 homes that may or may not have some suites in it, is a trade-off, and then he gets to have these 19 houses. Well, the 19 small townhouses is too much for this area. I would encourage someone to look at this and say, no, it just doesn't work. It's too dense, and it's not going to fit with what the current plan is, because we have an incredible neighborhood that gets 400 kids on a Halloween. Parents were driving, we saw cars drive up, and mom would kick dad out with the 2 kids, and up and down our street they would come, and all over Arranwood, because it's just that wonderful of a place. And this will increase the density and cause all the issues that the many neighbors that have come up and talked about so far have dealt with. So I hope that these things are taken into consideration however this proceeds forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Church. Do I have other residents looking to speak? I'll call for a third time. Would the applicant care to speak again? Okay.
Just want to thank everyone for all their comments, and it's given me lots to think about. That is a conceptual sketch that we have there. There's ways to rearrange the site. Maybe it's not 19, maybe it's 17, maybe it's, I don't know. I think once we put in all the constraints around trying to allow for parking, driveway width, drive lane, all of those things, we'll come up with a design that we'd go through development permit with. With respect to parking elsewhere in Woodland Creek, I think it's probably been noted that sometimes we get painted with a different brush from our neighbors, where there's been the last, I think, 20 homes in that phase in Churchill Meadows was every home had a suite in it. That's not our intent in the next application. We have very few suites in Woodland Creek right now. The last phases we've built, we've ensured that there's enough parking for in the single family for 2 cars in the driveway, 1 or 2 in the house. I think that's noticeably different when anyone tries to navigate. And we recognize that we're a drop-off pickup area for the school, so that's something was part of the design idea behind keeping suites out of that area to keep the traffic flow, because we've a lot of parents park there during the day. So, so with respect to this application, we've got lots to think about. I understand the concerns. I understand the needs of the neighbors. Can certainly say that I don't think we would see any connection to the strata in terms of a shared driveway. I think that's the strata's right to, and I defer to engineering and Sooke, but that's the strata's right to control access to their private property, and figure out how we could redesign some of the concept there to maybe increase the minimum rear yard setback is 4.5 meters for the zone. Whether we can increase that rear yard setback to create a larger backyard, create more separation. We'll see if we can fit that with trying to deal with the parking as well.
Mr. Robertson, do you have any thoughts at all? Thank you very much for that, by the way. Any thoughts on the easement? There was a few residents that raised that as a possible solution. I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on that at this time, rather than just increasing the rear lot.
Yeah, I'm like a 2 or 3 meter easement probably makes what we're proposing not viable in terms of the width, because it would reduce. We're trying to deliver a smaller unit, a 3-bedroom or 2-bedroom home, and build that. So, maybe there's room. I just don't. I'm not certain about how that would function really well in terms of maintenance and whether security and access and those sort of things. I don't know how much of a benefit it would be if we can fit it into a design. I think we'd rather increase the backyard, create more landscaping requirements for the backyard to create some better separation, and maybe it's not one fence shared. Maybe there's two fences. I mean, I think once we get the survey work done and determine where the fences are, I mean, our experience in building back-to-back single-family homes with a shared fence line, typically we have the fence on one of the properties so that it's not right on the property line. It's actually built first on fully on one side of the property line, and that way maintenance is one person's obligation. It's something neighbors have to work out, I guess.
Thank you, Mr. Robertson.
Okay.
All right, I'd like to call for a final time for any members of the public present here this evening for 6599 Arranwood Drive. Yep, this is a final call. Yep.
We're up again for round two. I just wanted to make a comment and appreciate Mr. Robertson's desire at least to look at the situation of an easement. I think there are solutions. We talked about covenants, and an easement itself is an understanding between, as I understand it, between two parties that come to agreement on a situation. Had it been thought about a number of years ago, it could have been built into the zoning and the planning at that stage, and we could each have given a little bit to make the boundary down the middle with some clearance there. It's a bit late to do that, and we would need to encroach on the property that is yet to be developed. But it seems to me that with a willingness on both sides, some kind of arrangement could be made whereby this easement could be shared and jointly maintained and would provide a solution to the problem. Thank you.
Derek Church, yes. Sorry, just two things I realized as Lara was coming up to mention as well. In Arranwood as well, it's important to note that our units are actually a couple feet off the ground in terms of we have a back and a front porch, so we actually step up. So there's a 6-foot fence, but once you're 2 feet above standing on a porch, it's not really a 6-foot fence anymore. It's more like a 4-foot fence. So again, there's privacy concerns there. And I guess a question, and I'm not sure how this could be answered, that the lady mentioned when she was reading out, I'm sorry, I don't know your name. But when you were reading out... Fair enough, thank you. When it was read out at the beginning and described the Arranwood itself and what this proposal was all about, you mentioned that these were things that were going to left the design decision, the define fave, the engineering, topics like parking and that and everything else. Why can't they answered in this application to start with?
So just in terms of process, and I'll have staff correct me if I'm incorrect, is this point we're just dealing with the zone as to whether or not this zone and these uses would be allowed, and if council is willing to allow that zone. Should the zoning be approved, then the applicant will work with staff to work out the development permit, what form and character looks like. They would have the actual survey drawings, so then they could see exactly how many units may fit in there. They would take in the concerns of the neighborhood, and then also look at things like stormwater and drainage, landscaping, those sorts of things. Is there anything more? And then that would be another permit and another process. The district does have a subdivision development bylaw that would have a number of things that everyone would need to conform to and then carry on. So this is basically just seeing, would council allow for this zone and this use to occur in this particular area? Those other things will follow later. So none of that occurs if this doesn't happen.
Right. So, but if you do approve it as the council and you approve it, it's up to you then to work with the developer and say, you shall provide at least 2 separate parking spaces that are accessible at all times? Or these are the, so to speak, the leashes that the council will put into place on the developer to meet the criteria that's been discussed tonight, if you deem them worthy?
At this time, what council is considering, the recommendation or where we've moved first and second reading so far, is the Section 219 covenant, which would be a height restriction. And then the affordable housing piece has been put forward, and as well as the parking has been put forward as is. So council could make changes to that should council as a body so decide. But if not, then those things would carry on. But then the developer has also expressed an interest to continue working with staff to alleviate concerns of the community. So then those other things would follow through after the rezoning. But perhaps if I could have staff just perhaps answer that, just clarify a bit more appropriately or better than I have.
Thank you, Your Worship. You are correct. This is a rezoning all about if council considers that the density is appropriate for the property. The other issues related to all the issues that were brought forward tonight will be dealt with and can be dealt with by staff during the development permit, and also the issues related to Bylaw 404, which is our subdivision and development servicing bylaw, which takes into consideration the access requirements, road width. Being a private road, we would be working closely with the fire chief, et cetera, to make sure that there was adequate width on the road for fire service vehicles. As I said, there'd be parking. Drainage is a factor within Bylaw 404 as well. The other issues that were brought up were the pedestrian issues related to walking and availability for sidewalks within the development. There's ways and means that we can control those issues now that we know what all the issues are about, but the rezoning tonight is about whether it's appropriate for density.
Okay. So when will the community have a chance to weigh in again on this? Or when the results of your communications with the developer, or is this it?
This is it.
This is it. So
Yeah.
as mentioned before, I mean, the consensus or the understanding was the developer was going to talk to people in the community about what was going to happen. And admittedly, he was good, and he came out last week and he talked to Greg and that. But that's the hearings tonight. That's not really a huge amount of time for a feedback loop to occur.
The public hearing is tonight for the zone. Does the development permit come to council?
Yes, Your Worship. The DP comes back to council.
Okay, so once they hit the development permit stage, at this point, council has established that all development permits are to be approved by council. So that would be a second opportunity should the rezoning pass.
And the community will all be informed then and have a chance again to see what's occurred and what council has done with regard to the zoning and any changes?
In terms of notices, though, for development permits, there is not a notification required, I don't believe, for that.
Your Worship, there's no notification required for a development permit. There is for a variance permit. But it would be advertised in a subsequent rezoning, or excuse me, in a subsequent council meeting. There would be an advertisement with regards to it coming forward.
Right, so we would advertise the meeting, but we wouldn't necessarily advertise the development permit, though.
The development permit would be on the agenda, listed in the agenda.
It'd be listed in the agenda, but not like, we don't do notices like we do with a public hearing, no.
All right, so there's still a chance for us to find out what's going to happen next and what the decisions will be made and what compromises are made.
Yeah, it depends on how the process. So if this passes, then it would depend on how long, I suppose, it would take for the developer and staff to work out what the next stage is. Sometimes things happen quickly, and sometimes they take a few months.
Okay.
Just for engineering, all that sort of work that has to be done, and when the developer is willing and decides to come forward with the permit. At this time, council has all of those coming through. In previous years, we've had that authority delegated just to staff, so there is no public input, but at this point it is.
Okay. So we'll still have a chance to speak.
Yeah.
All right.
And then everything on the agenda is an open meeting, so there's always the opportunity to speak. And at any time, you can email council at any time on any item anyway. We receive all the correspondence.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Church. Okay, so for a final time, please. Thank you.
My Hi, Gregory Verano again. Just a couple of questions. As far as affordable housing, there's so many definitions of it. What application of it is going to be used for this development? Is it going to be home ownership, market home ownership, supportive housing, subsidized housing? Or is it going to be what percentage of rentals will be allowed? Because that's one concern of us, is the amount of rentals that will be available in this plan. Because we have issues on our own with renters that are a little bit problematic. We just want to make sure that it doesn't become a rental facility. The other question is, as far as the selling price, I don't think there's going to be anything in 2-3 years under $400,000 in Sooke, because a median price right now for a house is over $500,000. I can't see this going under affordable housing and these houses selling in 3 years for $250,000. You got to be realistic. I mean, you don't even have to guess. Just look at the newspaper and the realtor listings for prices. You can only buy a vacant lot for $250,000 in Sooke, and not even a good one. So we need this defined. What type of affordable housing this complex is going to be?
Okay, so I'll answer what I can. In terms of rental or no rental, we don't have that. There is no proposed BC Housing rental not-for-profit component to this project. With affordable housing, what some developers have done is they've built an affordable, using that threshold that Councillor Casper alluded to earlier, to provide a unit, so much density, so many units, or they've contributed $5,000 into the district's affordable housing pot, $5,000 per door. Other developers recently have agreed to put suites in, and council has determined that has met the affordable housing criteria. We've dealt with that, an application like that very recently. So in this case, the developer is looking at the entire project as a whole from 2005 to current, where they've had single-family units, and what is being proposed here is to address the affordability piece. So it's up to council to decide whether or not that meets the policy, or to insist that the 5,000 be obtained. But in terms of rentals or no rentals, we don't have that ability to. We don't know that, and I don't really know that we have the ability to do that. And right now, we're continually hearing from residents of a need for more rental housing and to find ways to put more rental housing to our community. So I don't know that we're right there in terms of restricting rentals. And maybe that's something the strata of the day, should this project roll ahead, could make that determination on their own accord.
Okay. Usually there's a percentage. Like, I come from Ontario, and
we don't have that.
There's no percentage.
No, so, like in any subdivision,
okay.
Not that I'm aware of, is it that so many are rentals and or not. We don't have that in our policy. And actually, to this matter, Councillor Loggins has put forward a notice of motion saying we really need to get on top of the affordability piece within our community quite quickly to ensure that we're addressing it in some way, shape, or form.
Okay. The second thing is our complexes are RM1 density. This is also for RM2 density. If it's going to be a mirror image of our complex, and now he just stated that he may be thinking of putting less units in and bigger backyards, why does he need an RM2 zoning, and why isn't RM1 adequate enough?
I'm not sure. I'll, if I could defer to staff on the difference in the zoning, please.
Yep. The applicant was looking for a greater density on the site, but the same height, and that's where the 3 stories came from, to cap it at that. So that's why.
But we're 2 stories.
Well, the zone itself for the RM1 zone, which is what your zone is,
yeah.
It's 12 meters, which is equivalent to 3 stories.
So what's the difference between RM1 and RM2? That's what I'm trying to find out. The increased density.
Sir, if you can direct your comments to me, please, and I'll refer them to staff. I believe.
Sorry, Your Worship. I just need to get this straightened out.
Yeah, no, I understand. Thank you. I believe it's what staff has come back with is that there's a difference in the density between the 2 zones. I'll just have staff
That's
clarify.
correct, Your Worship. At the RM2 maximum height is actually 20 meters. So that's why the covenant has been suggested to go down to 12.
So other than the height, as far as density goes, this plot of land is only so big. He can only put 19 homes in it. If it was RM1, how many homes could he put on it?
Would we have a sense of what the density would allow, like the difference for densities between the two zones, maybe?
Your Worship, can we ask the applicant to respond to that, because he's done some of those studies?
Okay, is there a way to have a different microphone available?
I can get it.
Okay, thank you. Is that the last of your questions, sir? And then I'll have, is
Your
that the
Worship,
last of your questions?
Depends on the answer.
I can answer. I think I can answer for the applicant. We did have a conversation earlier, which is why this rezoning has gone from RM1 to RM2, and I believe the original calculation afforded him 11 or 12 units.
11 or 12, and now it could be up to 19.
Correct.
But again, it's conceptual, so the total number of units will be determined at development permit stage. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So it could be up to 19, and it could be less, depending on the drainage and all those sorts of things, the actual survey and the like.
Because this is it. I mean, for us, this council meeting to decide what zoning it gets from a commercial to RM2. I think we need to have a better sense of what is going to be built there, as far as the configuration, especially after the conversations we've had tonight. With now we're hearing the backyards may be extended, maybe putting in less homes. Like changes already starting to just in hearsay. Nothing's down in paper.
No, so I think, sir, in terms of paper, it would be the case that up to 19 units would be allowed on the zone with a rear setback being the 4.5. The developer being present here today is expressing an interest to hear from the concerns of the neighborhood in an open public forum. So from that, then he would continue to work with staff to see if there's a way of alleviating some of the concerns that have been raised by the residents should council choose to pass this zone. So council will take your thoughts and concerns. We certainly appreciate them and acknowledge them. And then when we decide to move forward, should we decide to move to third reading, perhaps council can consider a different zone, can consider the recommendation as is, or do other things. That is the will of council. But at this point, we're still in the public hearing. But in terms of what the developer had said, he's just looking at ways to alleviate some of the concerns on a go-forward basis.
Yeah, we're just looking at ways to ensure that our property value is intact, our neighbor quality of life is intact, and it's kind of hard to do in one open public meeting when there's a lot of uncertainty of what really is going to be happening on this plot of land. It's just a little unfair. I mean, maybe it should be delayed one more month until something more we have more concrete information of who's going to be our neighbor.
Okay. No, I appreciate that, sir, and certainly, Sooke, as we grow and evolve, when we come to different rezonings, we certainly have, and we certainly hear and can acknowledge that these are concerns, and we always strive to see how things work for the betterment, for sure.
All right, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Sorry, this is going on for a long time, but
Mr. Haldane, welcome back.
Yes, thank you. So I think people are being misled to some degree here. There is no other chance for anybody to change how this is going to turn out after today, unless the meeting's either postponed or you don't go to third reading. Right now, they're in a situation that the people here are trying to understand is the densities and so on. If this density is picked at RM2, that density is in stone. They're allowed to do that many units on that piece of property. Form and character is the only thing council is going to get to decide at this next development permit, and nothing unless it's just short of a covenant or some assurances. And I haven't seen any assurances built into this package yet of any kind of laneways, any kind of issues with bigger backyards or whatever. The only way to guarantee they're going to have bigger backyards or room for a laneway is to put it at RM1 or the RM1 and have the 12 units for that piece of property. Otherwise, they're entitled 19 units. And when they come back to you guys in a future date, they're going to show 19 units on there one way or another. And the parking, they're not required to add any more parking. They're not required to change any of that unless you guys establish a covenant on that, on this zone at this time now. So the staff will look at it and everything will come forward, but they're under no obligation to do any of it. So that's why they have covenants. That's why the 219 covenant for the height is restricting that, because that's what they want to do. That's the carrot that's being dangled here. Oh, we'll come down in height, but the density is still 19 units. So at this point here, I mean, if the neighbors that are here want what they want, they should be asking you to stick with the original zone that their property's on, which would be the 12 units per hectare or 12 units for this lot. So I mean, I just don't want people to think that they're going to be able to change anybody's mind come a development permit stage, because that won't happen. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haldane. Yes, you are correct. This zone, should council give third reading as it is presented, would have a maximum allowable of 19 units with the 4.5 meter setback. The developer, being present, has expressed a desire to work with the concerns of the community and to see if he can alleviate some of those concerns. We are still in a public hearing. It's not closed yet, so council can make changes or move something different than the proposed recommendation, as council has done before. At this time, however, we are still in a public hearing. But yes, that is correct. This zone would permit up to 19 units, should council pass it. Okay, calling for a final time on this public hearing. This will be the last.
I'm sorry for coming up. I know the other people are waiting for their presentation. I just have...
Yeah, we're coming up on 9 o'clock, but yes. Thank you, Mr. Church.
I apologize, but I do have just the one question then. From Mr. Haldane, he seemed to suggest, Your Worship, that we can request that council change the zoning on this application tonight.
Well, council is taking in all of the public hearing that we're all here, obviously, and listening to the views of everyone that has spoken. That's part of the decision making, as well as the staff report, the other discussions that have occurred, and council can look to pass third reading or make any changes, so forth, as it so decides. But yes, this is the final time to speak to this particular zone.
So essentially the ball's in your court. If you
It is.
approve the current zoning, he can go ahead with 19 units, and the calculations that your staff person presented, well, it's a garage, it's a slab, it's 2 parking spots, check.
Yes.
4.5 meters, check. And then nothing will be done to address any of the concerns, because council has approved that there's 19 units and it's a zone RM2.
We've allowed the zone in pieces like the form and character. The developer mentioned he's getting the lots currently surveyed. He doesn't have those results yet, so he needs to see exactly what will measure and what will fit on the property. He's also expressed an interest to work with the community and to find out with something that would alleviate concerns of the neighborhood. The developer has been developing in Sooke since 2005 in his own property for a long time. Woodland Creek is an award-winning subdivision, so I have no reason to doubt that developer wanting to do what is right for
fair
that
enough, and I'm not
community.
trying to impinge his character. I mean, we like what he's done with much of the rest of the place. That's why we
Yes.
bought there. I was just startled from Mr. Haldane's speech to learn that you could resolve everything just by changing the zoning to the RN1. With 12 units, then there's room for the fire trucks to get through. It can resolve some of the parking issues. It can deal with almost everything that was presented tonight.
That is an option of council has, yes.
Council has the ability
Yes.
to basically, with a brushstroke, fix most of what was presented tonight?
Council can change or recommend a different zone, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay? Okay, so I'm going to call an end to the public hearing and close this. Council would just like a short recess of a couple of minutes, if we may, just given the time and everything. So I'll just call for 2 minutes. Thank you.
This is because...
Okay, if I could call everyone back to their seats, please. Okay, thank you everyone for your patience. So the public hearing is closed. I do need to correct myself in that council can't amend the zoning. The zoning is proposed as it is. Council can accept that or they can reject it, in which case it's up to the applicant to determine what they want to progress further. So that is not for us to say. Councillor Casper?
Yes, it's not very often that I say this after a public hearing. I have just as many concerns about what the final project's going to look like as what the residents and the commenters stated at the public hearing. I'm not comforted by the fact that the zoning is going to be for RM2 and is restricted to 3 stories maximum height. And I just think it's too much for this property. I'm also concerned about the fact that this property is being treated differently in regard to affordable housing and addressing the affordable housing issue. I'm not satisfied with the answer I heard in regard to the determination of the market value or market of these units in order to accommodate what our current policy states. And based on that, I cannot support giving the bylaw third reading. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ray, then Loggins, then Parkinson.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I do support a rezone in principle to look at density from the current commercial zoning. But I think what I'd like to say is, as we get tighter developments with the infill and density, I think it's an opportunity to use suggestions from these hearings to make our new developments more livable and to ensure we don't perpetuate challenges to our residents. There's been some lessons learned that I've personally have had as developments have come to council over the past 6 years. Parking, road widths, pedestrian, fire safety, privacy, and I think what we learned tonight was about potential issues of different strata councils sharing a common fence owned by one strata but not another, and drainage. So I think we're continually evolving in terms of our developments. But what I did hear tonight were people who have spoken, not outright opposed, but looking for opportunities to be good neighbors with a good developer. I, too, have trouble with the zoning as it stands. I'm concerned about the height for this. Looking at the area, I drove it today again, and I'm not sure at this point, given what we have, that I would support the RM2 zone.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Loggins.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thanks to everyone who spoke today. I will echo the sentiments before me. I'm not pleased with the affordable housing piece. I'm not pleased with the parking, the fire safety. And I think the part that's the most disappointing is that it seems that we have a lot of community residents who are reasonable, who are intelligent, who want to work with the development to make sure that it's the right fit for the place that they live. So I see that I won't support this motion, but with further consultation with the community that lives there, I think something can happen. I made the motion for first and second reading because I was hopeful that development could provide greater density and a mix of housing in our community. I don't think this is the way to do it, but I do hope that we can find some kind of balance, especially in terms of supporting the safety element.
Councillor Parkinson.
Through you, Your Worship, I'm pleased that everybody came out this evening to speak and for the project in general. I have been opposed to the parking issue for almost everywhere in town. It seems to be one of our biggest issues, and it is a concern for the fire department as well. So I would like to see that staff works with the developer for something different. I would like to see that the trees still stay there that are there. I would like the public to be informed that live there as well. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Pearson?
Yeah, through the chair to our planning department, what's the neighboring, what is the zoning? I'm trying to find out what the zoning is on the Alders property that the neighbors are living on. Is it RM1? It is RM1, okay. And the left from RM1 is 30 units per hectare for RM1 and 50 units per hectare for RM2, is that correct? If I'm reading my zoning map correctly? Okay. Okay.
Okay, I appreciate the sentiment expressed around the table here as well from members of the community. I do want to say that council recently did approve a rezone in a small lot subdivision, with suites being the answer to address affordable housing, so it's not uncommon, and it was very recently that this did occur. So that's where I think we are seeing different ways of affordability being addressed, but in that case it did pass. I do feel some empathy for the developer, because I know that he's been proven in this community of producing a very fine product. We hear the geothermal, which is an affordability piece. There was the first traffic circle. It's a very attractive place to live with the wider sidewalks and the like. And so that's where I do feel that should this zoning even have progressed, that the needs of the neighboring strata would have been resolved, and I have confidence that the developer would have done that. But I can see around the table that this zone will not pass, so I do hope that we do see you back here soon with a different zoning proposed. And if there's an opportunity for you to contact the strata nearby, they are the ones that are most directly impacted. I do know that good fences make good neighbors, and I certainly want everyone to live comfortably in the area that they've invested in. Everyone's home is their kingdom, so we do want to ensure that everyone does of their quality life. But I do feel that either way with the zone that you would have found a way forward there. So thank you very much. So council, I don't know that there is a mover or seconder required. At this point, I'm sort of hearing that there is no appetite to progress with third reading. So at this point, just a question to our corporate officer, what would be the appropriate motion?
And I think that if somebody is willing to move and second the motion for third reading, and then take a vote for that third reading, and then it would fail, and that would be the documentation required for our records that the council did not have an appetite for this rezoning as proposed.
Okay, so hearing that from our corporate officer, I'd like someone to move third reading to the bylaw. You may move it. It doesn't mean you need to vote in favor of it, but it's just to clean. Moved by Councillor Parkinson and seconded by Councillor Ray. I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? Council is unanimously opposed. Do you like to make a motion, Councillor Casper? Can't speak to this matter any further.
Is it possible to encourage the applicant to work with staff and perhaps apply for a different zone?
Well, I hope that I have stated that, and I
Yes.
certainly hope that the developer will do so, and I'm glad to hear you express that sentiment as well. I think it's very important in a time where we're dealing with infill, that we do have a need for affordable housing, and that we have reputable, solid developers working in our community, that we continue to encourage them to do so. So I hope that we do see something in the near future. Okay, thank you, everybody. If anyone here for 6599 Arranwood Road would like to leave, then we'll continue on with the bulk of our agenda. Unless you would like to stay. It's always fun and exciting things here. So, okay. So we're going to move forward then. We moved those on, so now we're actually going forward to our delegations. I thank you all for waiting patiently. I'm sorry? Oh, goodness, okay. I'm sorry. We do have one more public hearing, 2325 Church Hill Drive. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you. The applicant is trying to rezone from low-density multifamily 1 to small lot residential to address, again, Sooke's growing housing demand. It's a 1.8 hectare property within the sewer specified area. And for this site, we have proposed lots and homes that would be similar in size to and form to the Callumwood Lane projects, which here is a little overview map. Adjacent zones, as you can see, are R3, so somewhat consistent with that, and then the RM1 for the Alders on the other side of Churchill Drive. Small lot residential has horticulture, single-family dwelling, or duplex as permitted principal uses. And the applicant at the previous meeting was asked to prepare a concept drawing of the site, and so he has prepared this one, where basically it illustrates that we would downzone the property from approximately 57 townhomes to approximately 35 new small single-family lots. The applicant is proposing that each unit has 2 parking stalls, one in the driveway and one in the garage for homeowners, as well as additional parking space available within the site for visitor parking. And proposed units would be similar, as I said, to Callumwood Drive. The vacant lot is bordered between Churchill Drive to the west, Journey Middle School to the east, Callumwood Lane to the north, and Ponds Park Trail to the south, and the property drains towards Woodland Creek. Just a couple of snapshots of the area, some broom. Essentially, the site is flat, aside from several storage mounds of dirt. There's also established fir trees in this portion that were planted as Christmas trees in the 90s, and again are a natural asset to the site. There is some invasive Himalayan blackberry and broom, as well as grasses, and there's also a fair number of deer and other wildlife who were out on my site visit when I happened to be there. There's the broom forest. And so the proposal is supported by the official community plan, ensuring sustainable construction, trying to reduce residential sprawl, minimizing the impact on municipal infrastructure, and creating infill where appropriate. Again, we see the affordable housing policy, and this application doubles with the previous one, where the applicant feels that by providing a varied mix of housing options between Arranwood Road and the Churchill Drive, Churchill Drive sites, that affordable housing mix requirements would be met. There's a request for reduction in density. As far as this application review is, it's consistent with adjacent streets. However, the proposed zoning and policies outlined in the OCP encourage a variety of housing types, such as townhomes, OCPs, townhomes, live-work units, and row housing. So this site is actually doing the opposite. We're creating single-family, not smaller units, so they're larger, whereas the OCP is generally trying to get us to do infill, smaller coach housing, row housing, townhouse types of developments. So the applicant is encouraged to meet the challenge of creating diversity in housing type should this rezoning be approved. Development Services is supportive of the rezoning application to permit construction of single-family homes or duplexes on lots over 600 meters. In other words, a duplex is only permitted if the lot is over 600 meters. At subsequent development permitting stages, staff would look forward to further addressing parking, achieving unique form and character through diverse housing form, pedestrian orientation, as well as neighborhood privacy within the small lot subdivisions, particularly with regard to secondary and small suites. And again, affordability may be a challenge given the high quality of construction and design that Tatangi is renowned for.
Thank you very much. Questions from members of council? Seeing none? Okay, so one. Okay, go ahead, Councillor Parkinson.
Through you, Your Worship. In the write-up, it states that it will be 57 homes, but on everything that I have read, so you're stating that it's 35?
I believe the original conversation that I had with the applicant was 57, but with the new sketch plan, it shows that it's 35.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything else from anyone? Okay, so I'll move into the public hearing. This public hearing is being held pursuant to the Local Government Act. At this public hearing, any person who believes that their interest in property is affected by the proposed bylaw will be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard or to present written submissions respecting matters contained in the bylaw that are the subject of this hearing. Copies of written submissions received to date are available. It is important that all who speak at this hearing restrict their remarks to matters contained in the bylaw, and it is my responsibility as chair of this hearing to ensure that all remarks are so restricted. For those of you who wish to speak at the appropriate time, please commence your address to council by clearly stating your name and home address. Then you may give us the benefit of your views concerning the proposed bylaw. Submissions must be received before or during the public hearing in order to be considered by council. Members of council may, if they so wish, ask questions of you following your presentation or submission. However, the main function of council members this evening is to listen to the views of the public. It is not the function of council at this public hearing to debate the merits of the proposed bylaw with individual citizens. Everyone who deems his or her interest in property to be affected shall be given the opportunity to be heard at this meeting. No one will be or should feel discouraged or prevented from making his or her views known. Please note that this hearing forms part of tonight's regular council meeting and as such is being video recorded. Videos and their contents, including any personal information disclosed during the public hearing, will be posted on the district's website. So on that note, I'd like to open up the public hearing portion and welcome anyone forward to speak on 2325 Churchill Drive.
Herb Haldane, 3118C, Otter Point Road. I guess the only concern I have, again, is just consistency and expectations, especially with regard to parking once again. So the application, I think it's at the end of this agenda, but it's already gone through, talks about expectations of parking. They applied for a 350 square meter, just like this one, but parking, because council understands that there's big issues with suites and parking and so on, puts in a covenant, 219 covenant, to be registered prior to adoption of the zoning amendment to ensure that at time of subdivision, the owner constructs a minimum of one off-street visitor parking space for every 2 residential lots created, in addition to providing the number of parking spaces required on each residential lot for single-family dwelling and a secondary suite as per the zoning bylaw. So if we're asking this of one, why aren't we asking it of all of them? Where does it change? So I don't know where the bylaws change that says we're going to ask one applicant to go from a 10-lot subdivision down to a 7 or 8 lot, it says right in the report. But we're going to let the other one just do the full lots, and we're talking about 35 lots or so. We're talking about a huge amount of parking issues. We're talking about there's no guarantee of suites or no suites, because once you get the zoning, as we all understand now, that zoning says you can have a suite if you want, or you can't have one if you don't want. And then, of course, any of the lots that are over 600 square meters can have a duplex on them, and they don't really talk about that much either. But the whole point being, if we're asking applicants that are coming forward for all this extra parking, and the parking's needed, I mean, I build houses, I get how it works. Even when we're building the houses, it's hard to find enough room to park on the street when you're just framing them up and doing the foundation and so on. But we're at a situation now where if we're going to ask one subdivision to do it, and that's going to become a fairly quality subdivision based on we're going to have all these nice visitor parking spots for Christmas and birthdays and so on, we should be asking with this one. And this one here has got a ton of kids that come in there every single day to go to school. And I remember during the election about 3 or 4 years ago, there a guy complaining that walking your kids to school, you're jumping from street to street, side to side, trying to navigate through all the cars and so on. And we're going to add another 35 homes here, and we're going to have a bunch more suites and a bunch more situation across the road from multifamily and so on. So I just think that, again, if it's challenging to park, and we're coming up with these covenants, and we do covenants because we know that it's not in our servicing bylaw to ask for all this extra parking, that we should ask for a covenant of this application as well. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haldane. Other members of the public, please. This is for 2325 Churchill Drive.
Your Worship, Council, my name is Diana Jack. I live on 6507 Callumwood Lane, and we moved there just over a year ago. Very happy. It's a wonderful neighborhood, and primarily because most of the people living on our street are owner-occupiers, and we don't have a lot of rentals, and there is good parking on the street. I can't say the same for Churchill Drive. It's particularly dangerous on the bends when you've got cars parked on either side, and difficult for pedestrians. The nice thing about Callumwood is that kids are playing safely out on the street, because it's not clogged with parked cars. So my concern is the parking issue again. I think it will be compounded by the houses that have rental suites put in them. That will put a further strain on the available parking in the area.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jack. Thank you. Other members of the public for 2325 Churchill Drive? I call for a second time. Any members of the public? Third and final time? Anyone? Anything? Okay, so I will then close this public hearing, and we will turn back to council. Questions? Councillor Ray, then Loggins, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through you to staff, just going back to the parking that we were considering on Melrick Place. My recollection was it was 2 parking, one in the garage and one in the driveway. But we asked for the third one if there was a suite, that it could not be part of that. So I want to differentiate that it really was the same in terms of parking for the 2 stalls. It was when there was a suite that was going in that we asked that it be separate. Is that correct?
That is my recollection, and that's why the covenant was there, and it was because of the suite issue.
Thank you.
Thank you for raising that, Councillor Ray. Councillor Loggins?
Thank you, Your Worship. I am just reading this again. The language of this was a bit concerning, and hopefully I can get some clarification from staff through you. But essentially, when it's saying we're downzoning from 57 townhomes to 35 new lots, I just want to know what the size of each lot is, because if it's possible to put townhomes on most of the lots, then we could end up with 70 units. So I just want to get clarification on what I guess is the max number of units that we would have, not lots. I guess those two.
Your Worship,
it's like comparing apples and oranges instead of oranges and oranges, if you know what I mean.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Loggins. So the R3 zone has a minimum lot size of 350 square meters. It would have to have a minimum lot size of 600 to be a duplex. So, and townhomes are not permitted.
So 600 for a duplex.
Okay, so so the minimum lot size, 350 square meters for 35 new lots.
That's
and
correct.
How many units would be on each lot?
One.
Just one. Okay.
Unless they're, and I'm not sure that the applicant has fully firmed if some of them would be a 600 square meter lot. I think there might have been one or two. And then those ones, being that size, would be able to accommodate a duplex only.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, so I just, and maybe if it's possible to get clarification from the applicant, I'm still kind of, I don't know how many units this is for.
It's for 35 units, 35 small lot units.
With 35 lots, but then a few lots potentially larger.
But out of those 35, like you could have 33 lots and
yes, so
plus
that's just what I want
one
clarification on.
600 meter lot with a duplex, so then it would be the same.
Can they all be larger lots?
Well, I think that
because it's just the minimum lot size. So what I want is clarification on that. I want to know how many units there'll be on this property.
But I don't, if I may though, and I'll have staff correct me, I don't know that we can fully make that determination. What we're approving is the zone and the allowable density and the uses in that zone. So once the surveyor comes in and they work out what they hold on the site, then it can be determined. So we hear about road widths and sidewalks and servicing, landscaping may end up reducing, or the lay of the land. Some lots may loan itself better to being a 600 meter lot than others. So it may be premature to know exactly at this time that it's going to be this number of lots definitely, because with everything we've seen, it's sort of hypothetical. It's just that this zone and the rough calculation would allow for this. But sometimes we know that it's flat topography, but I'll let staff clarify that further. I don't know that we can get that precise though.
Thank you, Your Worship. Excuse me. No, I can't get it precise for you because I don't know the specific size of the lot in its entirety, but the minimum lot size is 350 square meters. So whatever the lot size is divided by 350 square meters minus the road is the number of lots he could get in there. And I don't have that figure, unfortunately. Or he could have some 350 and some 600. And then on the 600 plus, he could have duplexes on it.
Right. So I guess what I was just trying to get at is based on the drawings that we have today, because this is assuming this is what they're going for, pending everything goes well. So these are all smaller lots. They're under 600 square feet.
Through your worship to Councillor Loggins, I believe there's maybe 3 600 square meter lots, maybe a couple more. I can't tell by looking at it, and perhaps the applicant could clarify that if we can ask him.
Yeah, that would be great, because I'm not, obviously I don't want an exact number. I understand that's not going to happen today, but if these are all 600 square meter lots, then I want to know that, but if they're not, that's fine. I just want a general idea.
Your Worship, through to excuse me, Councillor Loggins, I don't know the precise area of the lot, but just judging by the lot size and the configuration, I would think that you're probably looking at, if everything was 350 square meters, you'd be looking at 40 to 42 lots maximum. Just judging by the area that's there, because you got to minus the roads.
I saw a nod of agreement from the developer. Does that satisfy your...
That satisfies my question. It's just the way that it's stated, where you're comparing townhomes to small lots, is a bit confusing.
Okay, good. Councillor Parkinson, please, then Casper.
So just a question in regards to that. So there may not be 35. It could be higher then, right? Like you just said, 42 instead of 35. Correct?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Parkinson, you could have a few more lots, but they would have to be smaller lots than 350 size. Yes.
Thank you. My other question, too, is there is a real concern with parking in town for no matter where you go, whether it's downtown or for any subdivision. And having 35 homes and really only having 35 parking stalls there, I think that we have to do more for the parking. Having the car in the garage, like they say, and one in the driveway doesn't constitute 2 parking stalls. So I think we really have to look at having more parking, visitor parking, whatever, into these subdivisions instead of having them on the streets because it's getting very congested. Thank you.
Okay, but if I may, it looks like there's one in the driveway, one in the garage, and one, also an additional one on site. Mr. Howitt, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Parkinson. Because this is going to be a fee simple subdivision, it kicks in a lot of other regulations, such as the public interest values under the Land Title Act, and the approving officer, when during the assessment of the subdivision, could be looking at more parking if needed.
Thank you for that clarity. Councillor Casper, please.
Yeah, before I speak to what I think could be a solution on parking, I just have a question through you to staff. Is it possible to grant third reading with the addition of a 219 covenant being registered prior to the adoption of the bylaw?
And
through you, Your Worship, yes, it is. And that would be typical of the same motion that appeared on the screen for the last development that didn't get approval. And we can draft that wording for you.
Okay. So I'm prepared to move third reading subject to a 219 covenant to be registered prior to the adoption of zoning bylaw number 683 bracket 60046 to ensure that at the time of subdivision the owner constructs a minimum of 1 off-street visitor parking space for every 2 residential lots created in addition to providing the number of parking spaces required on each residential lot for a single-family dwelling and a secondary suite as per the zoning bylaw. That's my motion.
Okay, so that's been seconded by Councillor Pearson for discussion, but I would like...
now, if I can speak to it?
Can we... Yep, you can speak to it for sure, but Councillor Casper, once staff has put it on the screen, I just want you to confirm that that is actually what you moved, just so we make sure we capture it properly.
Well, actually, if you go to the next item on the agenda, that next bylaw on Melrick Place, I read it out word. I just read it word for word, so it's there. So if I may speak to it, and I don't mean to take up my 10 minutes that I'm allowed to speak, because there's too much business here tonight. I feel that we have to demonstrate that we're applying the same standards in regard to parking concerns that have been raised in regard to other rezoning applications in Sooke, and this is the best way of dealing with it, because once the zoning's granted, we have no control whatsoever whether or not suites will be allowed or will be provided for within the dwelling unit. That's entirely up to them. Once you got a 350 square meter lot, guess what? You can have a suite. No ifs, ands, or buts. Nobody can control that at all. It can't be stopped at any stage. It cannot be stopped at subdivision stage. It cannot be stopped at building permit stage, as long as they meet all of the requirements of the zoning bylaw. And so the only way that we can deal with the parking is to add this covenant and to have it on title to address what's the common theme that we've heard here, I guess, ever since I was first elected in 2005, and that was parking, parking, parking. And you know what? The district has failed miserably in dealing with parking issues. You know, that's a great subdivision that you all live in, but guess what? Parking's the nightmare. Doesn't matter what time of year you go there. Halloween was a horror story. We had people complaining that they couldn't park on the street. despite the fact there were no signs, but they still couldn't park on the street because it posed a hazard for emergency vehicles. So that's how bad it's gotten. And the only way that we can address these issues is to put in these types of covenants so that the applicant fully understands you can't walk away from the problem once the houses are built. And they're all great developers. I love them. They employ my son in Langford, for God's sake. And we don't want to become Langford. But I'll tell you this, that I don't want to see us become Langford either. And the way to deal with it is to deal with these types of matters in a constructive way and to get it on title so that it's done. And so everybody knows what they're buying into. Because I don't think a lot of people realized how bad it was going to be when they purchased there a number of years ago. And we're the ones who feel the repercussions. And we're the ones who get the phone calls about the parking problems. So I would hope council would support this as being a condition of granting third reading. And once that covenant's registered, then, final adoption could be granted.
It's been seconded already, otherwise he wouldn't be able to speak. Okay. Councillor Ray?
Yes, through your worship to Councillor Casper, just clarifying, when you're talking about off-street parking, are you talking about parking stalls in an area, or can it be part of the, like in front on Arranwood, where the part of the street curves into the property? Is that what you mean? Are you talking about some separate place where they take a lot out or something?
No, I'm talking about what this council spent almost an hour and a half debating in regard to the Melrick Place rezoning development. It was almost an hour and a half we talked about parking, and we came up with a fairly good solution that was suggested by the developer, that we do this. And that's what I'm suggesting too. And you know what? Quite frankly, I don't think that's going to be too much skin off the developer to provide that space off of that property.
Councillor Ray?
Yes, through your worship, could staff bring up the proposed lots for this new subdivision? I'm also mindful that the two developments in space are very different. I agree with the need for some consistency, but as Councillor Logan's mentioned, it's about comparing apples and apples and not apples and oranges. And one of the big things with the Melrick Place was there wasn't really an area that allowed for the movement of the fire truck. I still agree that parking's an issue. I'm just wondering, given the size of this, if the suggestion is one off-street visitor parking space for every 2 residential lots, if that's not a lot to be expected given the size of this development in comparison to the other one. I just raise it as a question.
Yeah. Okay. Other members of council? So this has been moved and seconded. I guess the question would be, for myself, just some clarity. The other one was, it had to do with the suites, and the developer had expressed a desire to put suites in, whereas we heard from the developer of this one earlier that there may not be that many suites in there. So would this kick in only, like, if there's suites, and then if there isn't, then it wouldn't kick in? Because that's where we had no way of knowing for sure at the time. He had said that they were going to put in suites, and that was the affordable housing piece. But I perceive this one as a bit different. And just given what the developer has done already, there aren't any suites in that particular development.
Your Worship, the one that was debated the last couple of council meetings ago on Melrick, the covenant is only relevant if you're putting in a suite.
Okay.
And the wording, I believe, that Councillor Casper was using tonight would be the same wording. So if you're only building a single-family dwelling with no suite, the added parking would not be required. if I heard him correct. And just for correction, it wasn't the developer that proposed this on Melrick, it was staff that did.
Yes, okay.
Thank you.
So for clarity then, this is the same wording then? So this would only apply if there was a suite put in, and otherwise it would not be necessary. It would be just as the developer had proposed, where there's the parking on the property. So it's only if there's a suite.
Only if, yes, Your Worship, only if there's a suite.
Okay. Councillor Loggins, please.
Thank you. Sorry, there's a lot of chatter going on all over the place.
I don't agree to any additional information other than the main motion that's moved to the second. As a mover, I don't support any further amendments.
Okay.
No amendment mentioned.
Well, there's new information being typed on the screen.
Okay, so can we just leave the language? Okay, go ahead, Councillor Loggins.
Thank you. That actually brings up another question, which is something we should consider with this motion, which is the affordable housing piece, since it was tied in with Arranwood. But now that we're not moving forward with that, we can't be assured that we'll actually be afforded that piece. So I don't have an answer for how to address that, but I think before we move ahead with this motion, we need to figure out how we're going to address affordable housing, because it's no longer applicable the way it's stated.
Okay. I think council's aware of that when we denied one and are moving forward with the other. So I think the suite thing would kick in, and that's how the other developer addressed it, and here it would be the same. We don't necessarily know, but there's the parking. Okay? Any further comments on this motion as it's presented? Councillor Pearson?
Yes, thank you. And I'm trying to read it from there, and then I'm trying to read it on here at the same time. So I guess I'm kind of confused. So it's not uncommon. Off-street visitor parking space for every 2 residential lots created, in addition to providing the number of parking spaces required on each residential lot for a single family dwelling and a secondary suite as per the zoning bylaw. So this isn't, so just so everybody knows that this motion that was made, and we're having the discussion about it, is saying that this application is going to have 2 parkings, every 2 residential lots, and we'll just say that there's 40. There's going to be 20 parking spots created off-street. That's nothing to do with the suite. That's nothing to do with the number of lots. There's going to be each residential lot for a single family dwelling and a secondary suite per the zoning bylaw. So there's 2 different things mixed into this motion in the wording. So if there's 40 lots being created, there's going to be 20 parking spots off-street. On top of that, there's going to be 1.5, I think it's 1.5, I can't remember what our zoning bylaw says now, for every house that has a suite in it, there's going to be 2 spots off-street. So we'll be creating 1, 2, 3, 35, 40, 60. There'll be about 80 parking spots in that subdivision? Just my math, but I'm just, if there's 40, there'd be 80, 1.5. That's a pretty onerous change. I mean, I recognize that we've copied down another requirement on another subdivision.
Yeah.
And I'm I seconded this for discussion, but this is like copying one 219 covenant from one subdivision to another. Maybe the wrong one is the other one. Like
no, if I may, Councillor
no, but I don't want to talk about that zoning. I'm just saying is that we're copying this to a 219 covenant, and it's up for discussion. I think we have to be careful at some of and I get the parking is a big issue, but we start adding that up, and then we start multiplying suites and things like that in there. This is pretty unclear to me. This zoning This 219 covenant is not clear to me. And I agree with the parking as an issue, that we have to get some off-street parking, and we have to make sure that our emergency services are there. But I think before we start adding on 219 covenants, we better know what we're adding on.
Okay, if I'll speak and then I'll go to Councillor Casper. Like, I do find that this is over the top. The other one did not allow any street parking because it was so narrow. So I think there was a few spots, parallel parking spots allowed, and it was a dead-end road and no parking in the turnaround because the fire truck couldn't make it. So that's where, like, you couldn't even park on the street. In this case, the road width would allow itself for someone to park in the street, and I just think this is way too much. This is too much to ask to create in this case. I think Councillor Pearson's math, I don't know if it's correct, but it sounds correct to me that you would have the parking in that driveway, on the lot, additional on your land, and then like another, 60 some visitor spots. I don't agree with it. Councillor Casper?
Yeah, I don't view it as over the top. And my rationale is this, that the zoning as it currently stands within that subdivision will allow for parking on both sides of the road and a sidewalk on one side, and you will see the pavement area reduced substantially, which will create a huge problem. Go into those subdivisions right now on any given night, and you will see how much parking is on the street and how much is on each individual lot. And two cars cannot go side by side on the road. It's almost impossible because vehicles are either parked up halfway on the sidewalks, vehicles are parked on both sides of the roads. There's no restrictions whatsoever where you can and cannot park on the street. And it's because the zoning bylaw allows for these narrower roads, the sidewalk on one side, and this huge expanse of area that is actually eaten up by right-of-way for sewer services and water line services that aren't under the road, and that can't be driven on, and so people park on the street. And it's unreal. And the way to address the issue is to grab the bull by the horns and go back and say, hey, you can't get away with suddenly saying, oh, I may not see a single-family house being built here. Well, no, that's not the case. The only way you can ensure that is to actually make that a requirement in a 219 covenant, that only single-family houses shall be built on this subdivision and no suites are allowed. So are you prepared to do that? I doubt very much that anybody around the table is prepared to do that, and I don't think that the applicant would be in favor of doing it, because I think the applicant, no doubt, is either going to develop all the lots or sell them to another party to build on them and market them. I don't know what their business strategy is or their business case, but I'm not comforted by the fact that I've seen that development grow over the years, and it's great development. The biggest problem is parking.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Casper.
I think this is the only way you're going to deal with it. Otherwise, you will get phone calls once that development occurs.
Okay, Councillor Ray. Then
Yes,
Parkinson.
thank you, Your Worship. I too, and it was my comment earlier, I don't feel comfortable comparing the small, tight area that we did on Melrick Place to the subdivision that's proposed here. And I think there's very few streets in Sooke where you can drive two vehicles side by side. So my concern is that somehow arbitrarily tonight we're going to start with this development. And I do think it is over the top asking for the amount of space, parking space, as it's laid out there. So as it's laid out there, I won't be supporting the motion for the 219 covenant, but I will support the third reading.
Okay, Councillor Parkinson.
Through you, Your Worship, it is a lot of parking spaces there. When I add it up, it seems to be quite substantial. So I don't think there is quite the requirement for all that parking. I hate to bring up Langford, but how they have the parking in West Hills along the side of the road where there's actual parking so you can drive down the street and then park to the side for the houses, that should be something that we could be looking at too in the future.
Okay, so this has been moved, the third reading has been moved with this Section 219 covenant piece, so I will call the question on this motion. It's already been moved, it's been moved together, the two pieces. Okay, so all those in favor of the motion? Opposed? Councillor Parkinson, Councillor Loggins, Mayor Tate, Councillor Ray, and Councillor Pearson, I believe, are all opposed. So the motion fails. So I'll be looking for another motion, please.
Yes, Your Worship. I'll move that Council give third reading to the bylaw cited as zoning amendment bylaw number 683, 600-46, 2017.
Okay, is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Pearson. So now we have just the third reading on the floor without the Section 219 covenant. We've talked about this a lot tonight and heard a lot, so is there anything more to add? Anything new from members of council to add? Go ahead, Councillor Casper.
Well, I won't be supporting it as it is right now because there's no guarantee that suites will not be included in the single-family houses. And if they are, then guess what? You're going to have a huge amount of problems. And believe you me, it's not going to be any different than any other neighborhood that allows secondary suites. And, you know, I'm going to vote against third reading because council, in my mind, is not prepared to support any action that's going to guarantee that it's only going to be single-family houses. And I don't have a problem with the suites being built, providing you apply the same standard we've asked of others. And I'll leave it at that.
Councillor Ray, then Pearson.
Yes, and I do agree with Councillor Casper, and that was my oversight in, I really didn't want the parking for the street. So if I can make an amendment, if the seconder agrees, that we put back in the Section 219 covenant, requesting that if there is a suite, that there is a third parking spot.
Okay, so you can just make it sorry, so we have it moved and seconded, so if you like, you can just move an amendment, then we can look for a seconder to the amendment. Okay. So perhaps a wording would be then that council requires Section 219 covenant to be registered prior to adoption of zoning amendment bylaw number 600-46 to ensure that at time of subdivision, the owner construct a minimum of one off-street visitor parking space for every secondary suite, as per the zoning bylaw. That's not the right wording.
No, that's not the right
wording.
If I could, if it could
okay,
be,
so I'll let staff wordsmith it because you're much stronger than I am at this. That council requires Section 219 covenant be.
Sorry, I didn't want to miss the intent at the end there. So
I think the intent that Councillor Ray is moving is that if there's a suite, that there would be parking provided. And only in that case would the Section 219 covenant be required. So if there's a suite, then there's parking, an extra parking done. Correct? That's what Councillor Ray is amending. Yeah. Is there a seconder for?
I'll second it, but I want to change the word.
Okay, Councillor Pearson has seconded the amendment, but let's just get the language up and then we can be sure that it's correct. Mr. Howitt.
Thank you, Your Worship. Going back to, and maybe I misled council in my previous comment when we were talking about the development on the previous Melrick one. The covenant goes on the property prohibiting any building until such time that the building permit is applied for. If the building permit is applied for and there's a secondary suite within the building permit, then they're obliged to commit to another parking stall.
That's all. That's what I'm requesting through this amendment, if that's required.
Okay. So is that reflective in this language that we're seeing come up on the screen here?
I'm sorry, Your Worship, I couldn't hear the specifics of the motion being stated.
Can you repeat it, Councillor Ray? Sorry for jumping in there.
No, thank you. That we're requiring that there be, at the time of subdivision, for a suite, that there be an additional parking spot. You had it worded before. A building permit. The intent of the amendment is to ensure that if a suite is being built, that there is additional parking.
Yes, that is what I understood. Yeah. Okay, the council, okay, we've had some assistance with the plan from the planner. Thank you. Okay, the amendment is that council requires Section 219 covenant be required prior to adoption of zoning bylaw number 6A3? 600-46, one additional off-street parking space for every secondary suite constructed. Is that correct, or is it not building permit stage? I heard different here. Okay, let's get that fixed. Mr. Howard, is this covers off then that if there's a suite, then a covenant's required to have an additional suite?
Your Worship, that's what the other covenant was requiring.
Okay, so this only applies if there's a suite. Correct. Okay, so on the amendment, please, I have Councillor Pearson, then Loggins. Just our corporate officer, is your hand up?
Sorry, Your Worship, we do not believe that this could be enforced at building permit issuance, that it needs to be done at time of subdivision, that the covenant be put on so that it can be enforced at building permit, but it could not be put on title at building permit issuance. It needs to be done at subdivision.
Okay, so we'll go with staff's guidance on this, please. Whichever, is that fine for the mover and the seconder? Is that reasonable? Okay, good. Speaking to it, Councillor Ray, then Pearson, please, then Loggins.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I just want to make sure with the Director of Planning that this is correct, that it's subdivision and not building permit.
Mr. Howitt, subdivision, not building permit?
I believe, and I could be corrected, but I believe the other covenant was it restricted any building whatsoever when building permit was applied for until such time that it was proven that there was not a suite being built or a suite being built, and then the appropriate parking would be required.
My purpose is just to provide consistency from one development to another. And so that's what I'm looking for, is to make sure that we're consistent.
I believe, Your Worship, through to Councillor Ray, I believe the consistency is there. It's just a matter of when the covenant gets placed. It can be placed now or at the time of adoption, or it can be put on the property at the time of subdivision.
Okay. Councillor Pearson?
Well, what I guess that there's two pieces to this. Is that we have to make sure that it's clear that there's two off-street parking for any residential house, as well as at the time, and we have the ultimate on occupancy permit at building with our building permit. Anyways, that's the ultimate power that we have. people are going to want their occupancy permit. That's what banks want. That's what anybody wants. So, I mean, the building permit stage, I think we're just overcomplicating it. But what this is speaking to is in our zone, in our small lot zones, that we need to add this into our zone so that it becomes automatic, that we're not putting on a 219 covenant, that becomes part of the zoning bylaw. So after this is finished, I'm going to make a motion that we revisit the small lot residential zone so that people understand if they're going to go to zoning that they're not going to come to council for an application. They're going to get it in their zoning application. And
Okay, can you speak to that after?
I will, but it's part of this is that what the public needs to understand is that we're grasping at straws to eliminate a parking problem, and we're putting a Band-Aid on after the fact. We need to do it up front, and that's where the problem lies, is people are still applying for small lot subdivisions without any kind of idea that we're going to come here, they're going to come in front of us, and we're going to ask for parking over and above what they already think they can do.
Okay, fair enough. Let's just stick to the motion, though, so that's the covenant on this. Is there anything further? Where of the covenant? I know I'm just finishing with Councillor Pearson.
Okay, so as I want to make it clear that there's 2 off-street parking plus 1 additional off-street parking at the time of building permit or at the 2918 covenant when people build an additional suite. That will start addressing...
No, there's just 1 additional off-street parking spot for every secondary suite proposed.
Okay, but there should be 3 off-street parking if something, so it's got to be clear. I've already got 1, so I'm going to put another one because I've got a suite? No, there needs to be 3 off-street parking at the time of building subdivision 219 covenant, whatever we want to call it. If you're going to build on a 350 square meter lot, you need to have 3 parking stalls if you have a suite in it.
But that's where they've already proposed that they have 1 in the driveway, 1 in the garage, and 1 on their property, and now this is to address just what would exist on the street if there's a secondary suite.
I'm comfortable with it. The problem is our zone.
Okay. Councillor Loggins?
This amendment is completely irrelevant because it basically assures us there will be no secondary suites. It means that we're losing lot space that could be built into a house for parking spaces. So why, in their right minds, would the developers create a lot of parking instead, and I don't know, that thought wasn't complete. But anyway, this is why I wanted to consider the affordable housing piece before we went into all of this. There's no way that secondary suites will be built if the requirement is to keep adding parking and parking and parking and lose space where they could be building homes.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Okay, anything further on the motion or on the amendment? This is just the amendment, so I'll call the question on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment? Opposed? Councillor Loggins and myself are opposed to the amendment. So the motion has been amended, so I'll look for council to give 3rd reading as amended. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Loggins is opposed. Okay, we're moving along. So to council, it is 10 o'clock, and we are now just entering our place. I know by council policy you are all entitled to 10 minutes to speak on every item, all of you. And I'm going to ask that you don't do that and you keep your comments to the point so that we can get through the business of the day. If at all possible, I think that would be appreciated by everybody. So at this point, we do have 2 delegations. Thank you very much, everyone, for waiting through all of this. It was public hearings, and there's not a lot of, you can't control the time because public hearings have that advantage. So at this point, I would like to welcome Ms. Carol Panelski forward, please, to speak on senior and youth facilities. You do have your full 5 minutes, though, and I'm not going to cut you off for 5 minutes.
I lost all my supporters, but I'm here. Mayor and Council, I'm Carol Panelski, 2099 Solent Road North. I am the president of the Sooke Seniors Drop-In Center and representing a coalition of seniors organizations including the Sooke Seniors Drop-In Center, Sooke Age Friendly Committee, and the Sooke Region Community Health Network. We are here to request an approval in principle for 4,000 to 5,000 square foot activity center on Lot A, Wadham's Way. The district sponsored a plebiscite in the November 2014 election, which resulted in a yes vote, 3,072 to 631, in favor of DOS working with the community to develop multi-use community center facilities, a copy of which I did attach to you. We simply ask for approval in principle for the land with the same concessions as the library, so we can proceed to request grant money, donations, and to fundraise. There is $200,000 in funding from the district put aside for a seniors' youth facility. We also have $55,000 raised by the Sooke seniors through donations and grants. And with the land and $255,000, that's pretty good foundation to begin obtaining funding. We can then approach Premier John Horgan, Randall Garrison MP, and Mike Hicks, CRD, re the gas tax funds. The drop-in centre executive spent 6 short hours on a Saturday at Village Foods with a survey that simply said, I/we support a 55-plus activity centre for Sooke. We gathered 239 signatures, and I'm confident had we been able to double that, we would have been able to double that if we had spent a second day. We then sent a questionnaire to all the respondents asking for input on what they would like to have offered in the centre. This has given us a comprehensive idea of not only activities, but willingness to volunteer and what they would be able to pay for membership. We have attached the results. It is our hope that we will have the opportunity to integrate appropriate senior and youth activities, such as ping pong, chess, checkers, darts, table tennis, what have you. The building could be used 7 days a week, Monday to Friday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. for the seniors, evenings and weekends for senior and youth activities, and also to use as a venue for celebrations and meeting space. Venues that are affordable, with easy access and adequate parking, are in very short supply in Sooke, and there is a need. Membership fees, food service, and bingo will all provide revenue, and also rental for meetings and celebrations. We anticipate this activity centre will enhance other senior programs, such as the Better at Home and the adult daycare. We also want to avoid social isolation among seniors. We attach a list of our assets, appliances, cabinets, tables and chairs, and kitchen supplies. We've attached a letter from one of the founding members of the Princeton Senior Centre. I had made inquiries as to how other centres got their beginning. Their stories are pretty much the same as similar, as I've heard from Agassiz, Lake Cowichan, Ladysmith, Ganges, and Cordova Bay. Also a copy of our visioning document that was prepared in 2013. 3 of the executives listed on that document sadly have passed away, having not seen a centre come to fruition. We can imagine a healthcare centre, a library, the activity centre would all support each other and provide many opportunities in the future. So I reiterate, we are not asking the district to pay for this entire building. Just please lease us the land and let us get the building built. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Panelski. Okay. Thank you very much. We do have a notice of motion that will be deliberated on later on today about reenacting the Sooke Community Center Advisory Committee. That'll hopefully see some things come to fruition soon. Thank you very much. I'd like to invite our next speaker forward, please. It'll be Sifu Moonfist, please. And if I could have a new 5 minutes on the timer, please.
Thank you. Again, I am Sifu Moonfist. My address is 202-6591 Lincroft Road, Mariners Village. I retired here 10 years ago, renting, and last year bought a condo at Mariners Village. I'm very happy as a resident of Sooke. Thanks to you all. Sooke seniors need a place to gather, a place to relax, a commercial kitchen, meeting rooms, activity rooms, and extra space to decide what more is needed and do it. I feel our time and energy better devoted to finding matching grants for building, not looking for capital purchase land grant opportunities. We already have the land. Investigation of where the lines are is essential. Wadham's Way is where the library will resituate itself, And it is in this area that I feel we should build a center for our community to cherish its seniors/elders, and probably more. More being, it could be open to quite a bit of the community, such as youth and community groups. Bless the Knox Presbyterian Church for what they are doing at the corner of Wadham's Way and Church Road. This feels wonderful to me, thinking that what is to be a seniors co-op will be so close by. Seniors have been paying taxes all their lives and should have these types of places provided to them. In other words, and this is important, I do not think that we need to raise any taxes from these people. Sooke, our municipality, is $102,977,783 in the black as of the 2016 audit. We can afford things like look after this particular group of our citizens. So nice to see Carol Panalski and hear the energy coming out of that side too. I say thank you to all businesses and people that have hosted the Sooke seniors since they moved from Sooke Road a few years ago. I do quite a bit around town, and it does let me see a few things, like where curbs need to be ground down. Much more recently, because now I'm celebrated, so many times over the years, people in Sooke have told me if I ever needed anything, well, here you go. Help us build the Sooke Senior Center. I ask that we recall the committee for, and it's that special community center committee. This committee included groups other than seniors, and to be clear, they are still welcome. I want to do what I can to best help in the community. Currently, I feel this is focus on the actual building of a center. I'm willing to volunteer as much time as it might take to put a 100-foot by 100-foot foundation and 20 feet tall with traditional finishings. This equals a 10,000 square foot floor base with options to add sections of second floor. Obviously, the dimensions must fit the land. I mention the as much time as it might take with a smile on my face. I know this might be a long time. You know me. Sometimes separate entrances into different areas of the same building are all that's required to house separate entities, i.e. the District of Sooke and the District of Sooke Fire Department. I mention this to show how separate entrances for separate groups relative to this project can be considered. However, combined entrances may have benefits of possible combined administration and possible combined security. I intend to request appointment to the committee, and I will do as directed whatever is necessary to help. People that truly want to give are always welcome. I hope we see more people in our community do more giving. As always, I expect direction from the district.
Thank you very much, Moonfist. Okay, so Council, moving on in tonight's agenda, this brings us to our public question and comment period. This spot on the agenda is reserved for any item that you wish to bring forward, except for the public hearings, because they had their own specific time. So if there are any members public here today that would like to speak on any of the other items, yep. If you could please come forward, we just require your full name, your address, and if you could let us know which item you would wish to speak to so we can have it present. And there's 2 minutes.
Good evening, Your Worship, councillors and staff. My name's Jeff Zigay, 6419 Sooke Road. I'll be speaking to the request for reconsideration by the Mayor regarding the support letter to reestablish Section 17 Reserve Designated Use Area report. I'd like to speak to the 10-year extension of the designated use area implemented on Sooke Harbor by the provincial government. I believe it destroys Sooke's plan for a waterfront walkway. Our current walkway is dead in its tracks where it stops now. This moratorium stops completely any development basically in Sooke Harbor. Nobody can do anything. I've got an existing foreshore lease for a marina right in the heart of downtown. And apparently now existing leases that are not built on, they cannot, or I should say they will not, be transferred. And I know this from speaking with our friend Mark Harvey at BC Lands. And so when that lease dies, that project dies. There's no public pier as an amenity package for a developer who comes in down there. The city doesn't get that. It doesn't get its walkway. The economic development for Sooke is about to take a huge long-term hit on this. It's been 5 years now. They're extending it for another 10. There's 15 years where nothing can happen in this harbor. And what do you think will happen after 15 years? This will be the status quo, and okay, Sooke just doesn't get anything. You think about that, and what developer wants to come and build your waterfront town when they're not allowed to access the water? I mean, it's hurtful to the town.
Thank you, Mr. Ziggy. Sorry, we're up on time.
Oh, I got a little tiny bit left here, honest. I've been here all night.
All right, make it
very quick.
Very quick.
There's no scientific data to support this. Our water quality has improved. That's due entirely to the fact that the District of Sooke developed a sanitary sewer system. To make the connection that using the foreshore is responsible for the water quality is weak at best. In fact, putting a stringent set of guidelines in place to build on the foreshore actually creates a net benefit to marine life. Steel pilings don't leak creosote and actually encourage the growth of marine life. Guidelines that insist upon steel pilings, plastic and coated flotation, and walkways and docks that allow light through them do no damage to habitat. This is it. You have to look no further than the government-sponsored sinking of decommissioned steel ships for artificial reefs, creating massive marine growth and diving meccas. In conclusion, I understand the provincial government pushed this through by compressing the timeline to respond. Some agencies didn't even receive it until the review period was up. I know the CRD is in that situation. I believe the impact of 15 more years of zero economic development for no reason other than good optics needs to be reviewed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Ziggy. We appreciate it, and for waiting. Other members of the public for tonight's agenda, all items except the public hearings.
Hi, I'm Doug Noctegal from 2150 Melrick. I just had one question regarding the Section 219 covenant that you just passed.
We haven't passed it yet, sir.
No, on the previous?
No, that one was for the 2325 Churchill.
Yeah. I just want to know the covenant that's coming up for me is the same one, because I don't believe it is.
It's different than we put it up initially as the same, and then we amended it so they're actually different.
Yeah. And so my question is, will I be then able to have the same covenant that the previous people did? Because our road is not we are fee simple as well when we're coming to subdivide our property.
So that one, council, when we get to it, council will just be looking at first and second reading. Yeah. It will go to a public hearing, so you'll have that opportunity to speak to it. And then on this one, it's a little bit different because it's asking for more parking than what the previous one wanted.
Yeah. And we talked about treating each developer samely, or the same. That's all we're asking.
Okay, I see what you mean.
If we'll be treated the same as the one on Churchill. That's all I'm asking for.
Okay, I got it. Thank you very much, sir. Other speakers on tonight's agenda?
Thank you, Your Worship. Members of Council, item 10.1, Knox Centre Affordable Housing Project.
We've had the opportunity to...
Sir, can I have your name, sir?
Oh, sorry, Andy Orr, 2245 Harbour Green Drive, Surrey, BC. Item 10.1, we've had the opportunity to review the staff report that's included in the package this evening, and just a point of clarification, the reference to asking for council's consideration of waiving of permit fees is indeed in the letter of request from the society in the second paragraph on page 2, where they're asking for consideration of waiving both development permit and building permit fees, along with DCCs and property tax exemption. Thank you.
Okay, are there other members of the public here to speak to any other items on this evening's agenda? Okay, so we're moving on. That brings us to bylaws and 8.1 2150 Melrick Place, the rezoning application. Turn this over to staff, please.
Good evening. The application before you tonight is to rezone 2150 Melrick Place from large lot residential R1 to small lot residential R3. The applicant would like to subdivide to create single-family residential lots. Based on the property's lot size of approximately 3,561 square meters, the maximum density permitted using a minimum lot size of 350 square meters would be 10 lots. There is a house on the property that the owners have stated that they would like to keep. Accommodating the existing house may require a larger lot size of approximately 800 square meters, which means that the achievable maximum density could be reduced from 10 lots to maybe 7 or 8 lots, depending on the final design. Until the applicant has applied to subdivide and has met the requirements of the Subdivision and Development Standards Bylaw 404, the final number of lots cannot be determined at this point, but just be aware that the maximum density under the zone is 10 lots. Also, in the R3 zone, a suite is permitted per lot. Due to the narrow shape of the lot and in efforts to ensure that parking concerns for the property and the neighborhood are addressed, staff is asking, and the owner had previously agreed to provide one visitor parking space for every 2 lots created, in addition to providing the required number of parking spaces on each lot for a single-family dwelling and a suite. In the draft covenant presented, staff have also asked that the one parking space that's required as per the zoning bylaw for the suite be constructed in a location on the residential lot that does not impede nor is being impeded by a parking space. For example, providing a secondary suite parking space in front of a garage or inside the garage would not be supported. Staff would also like to clarify that the visitor parking required would be regardless of whether there's suites put in or not. This is a zoning map of the subject property and the surrounding area. As the map shows, the area around the subject property is predominantly single-family residential. The proposed access will be from Melrick, and at time of subdivision, there is a possibility that the owners will work with neighboring properties to share an access. However, since we have not received a subdivision application, that cannot be guaranteed. In regards to affordable housing, the official community plan requires a minimum of 10% of the total of any proposed bare land or strata single-family residential subdivision to be affordable housing lots. 10% of a 10-lot subdivision would be 1 lot. There is a policy in the OCP that gives consideration to allowing developers the flexibility to provide their required affordable housing in different forms so as to provide an affordable housing mix. The applicant has informed staff that they will contribute to the affordable housing need in Sooke by providing secondary suites on each lot so as to increase the rental market. The owner has stated that the suites are also contributing to affordable housing by helping to make home ownership more affordable for first-time home buyers. The owner has confirmed that they will be building a suite on each lot in lieu of contributing one affordable housing lot, and is therefore satisfying this policy 4.7.3G. The proposed rezoning is providing infill and creating contiguous development to an area that is densifying, and provided that the parking concerns can be managed with the proposed covenant as presented, this application can be supported by the OCP and the strategic plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll go to Councillor Pearson, please.
Okay. Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. I'm going to make a motion that we give first and second reading, excluding, just dropping out, so it's an amendment. I guess you want to have an amendment first.
You're moving a main motion, so you don't need to,
yeah.
You can just make it. You don't have to worry about amending it.
So I'm going to make a motion that council give first and second reading zoning amendment bylaw 686, 2150 Melrick Place, and then that the parking, and my logic is that the parking should flow out of that after public hearing, because I think we need to understand we've got the same thing again. But
okay,
anyways,
so you just want to move the first part as presented, the first paragraph only?
Gives first and second reading, yes, please.
Okay, is there a seconder for that? Okay, that's been seconded by Councillor Parkinson. So we'll move just the first one. Do you want to speak to it further, Councillor Pearson?
Yes, and my logic is that for my other councillors is that because we're talking about parking, we need to go back to our zoning. We need to understand some other things that are out there, and it became real evident tonight. So I know we have to address parking in these small lot subdivisions, and I think that we hit on something that might be valuable to our staff and to us going forward, is that we address it somewhere in the building permit stage that they have to build. If they're going to choose to build a suite, then they have to have it on there. That was my logic, so thank you.
Okay, so Councillor Loggins?
Thanks. I'll support this. I do think that what we discussed with the parking with this application is the right way to do it. I think that the previous application was the incorrect way to do it. So I hope that we look at that when we're going through the public hearing phase. And thank you, Councillor Casper, for bringing that. Or
Councillor
sorry, Pearson. He's sitting at the for bringing that up.
Okay, that's good. So that's been moved and seconded. Well, first and second reading has been moved and seconded. Are there any further comments on it? Call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. I would like this, the public hearing.
I'll move the public hearing be scheduled for zoning amendment bylaw number 686, 600-47 in accordance with section 466 of the local government act.
Okay. Didn't have your microphone on. But Councillor Ray moved the public hearing as presented, and Councillor Pearson seconded that. Any discussion on that? See none, I'll call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. Okay, we'll see you at public hearing then. Thank you. Okay, so moving to Maple Park Terrace road closure bylaw. We have a staff report, and I guess we can move all three that council give first, second, and third reading to Maple Park Terrace highway closure and removal of highway dedication bylaw number 656/2017. Moved by Councillor Ray and seconded by Councillor Pearson. Any questions for staff on this? We've moved it all now. Anything further? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. Bylaw 8.3, the officer delegation bylaw is here. At a previous meeting, we had looked to have all sort of parts that were rescinded, restated, but our corporate officer has flagged in the report that not all parts can be reinstated per just the way other duties for the corporate officer and finance director are laid out. So in this case, we would actually need to make that fix. So thank you, corporate officer, for catching that. And what has been proposed then is that we rescind third reading and then we amend third reading. The report was fairly straightforward. Does that all make sense to everyone? Yeah. Okay, so move. Okay, so do we have to do the rescinding in two parts, I think, right? Okay, so move rescinding by Councillor Parkinson and seconded by Councillor Loggins. Any questions about that? See none. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. And now we would give third reading to the Officer Delegation Bylaw 672 as amended. Moved by Councillor Loggins, seconded by Councillor A. Oh, our corporate officer has her hand up.
Through you, Your Worship, I just wanted to clarify that it is Council's intention to give third reading as amended with the removal of 8F and 9E, which were the two sections that were recommended not to be included.
Yes, that's our understanding. Yeah. Sorry. Well done. Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, so Lot A logs, an update on the Lot A logs. Shall I turn this to staff, perhaps? We need a bit of help with this.
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe that the report is self-explanatory, and we've had a couple of people who were looking at the RFP that we put out originally for going in there and cutting up, but the two that we had didn't meet insurance and or the competencies that we required to go into our yard and actually buck up the wood. So what we are looking for right now is council to look at the ability to put it out for an RFP with regards to somebody giving us the or putting it out to tender for somebody purchasing the lot and taking it away. A lot of logs, yes.
Okay, so that is one of the and then there's a few other options.
There were other options, but from a staff perspective, the option of having an RFP out there for somebody to come and take it away, the money that we receive, we put towards the parks, our parks program or something like that. But one of the problems that we had when we were looking at the RFPs that came in that didn't meet the qualifications was the fact that we were concerned about people going in there and bucking up logs and et cetera and having to babysit whoever was in there, not only from a safety perspective, but we also have equipment in there that we would like to keep an eye on as well, and other issues within the yard itself.
Okay.
So this is a preferred direction that we would like to see.
Okay, I have Councillor, thank you very much for that. Councillor Loggins, then Ray, then Parkinson.
I'd like to move that we have a community bonfire and burn them in Lot A. No seconder? No seconder? Okay.
Nice try. Councillor Ray?
Yes, I'll move option C. But part of the motion, I would like council to make the decision as to where the funding goes.
Yeah.
That would be my only request, that there be a discussion where that will go. But I'll move option C.
Okay, so that would be that that's the staff recommendation to proceed with a request for bids to offer the sale of the entire lot of raw logs for the District of Sooke Public Works Yard. And then maybe we can add, and that council discuss where the funds would go at a future meeting date. Well, wait, I don't. We can't make that decision now. Well, we'll see. Is that what you're moving, Councillor Ray? Okay. Is that been seconded then by Councillor Parkinson and Councillor Parkinson?
I was curious as the two that put in a request to have the logs, were any of them willing to take all of them? Through your worship, sorry.
Your worship, through to Councillor Parkinson. No.
Okay. And the other thing was, when we decided to do this with the logs and take them away, it was decided that it would go into the grants for grant funding. So I think that decision has already been made because we had the discussion on it already.
Did we totally make that determination? Because then we decided...
It was if I can, Your Worship, my recollection was that the logs would go out through the request. But there was a discussion about going to the grants, and I don't have a problem with it going to the grants, but I don't believe that was an actual decision because the council chose a different method of
Okay. Councillor Pearson?
The actual discussion was around trying to get it to a charity so that they could manage it, and if they were the successful RPs. And I'm just going to talk about my displeasure with this process because this is what happens when governments get involved, because we've been cutting firewood for charities in Sooke for 150 years, and only when we take it over does it not work. It's exactly, you know, they've been cutting firewood in front of the Sooke ballpark. They've been cutting firewood, and only because we're some entity or something that it just falls apart. But anyways, there were several contractors that looked at it who thought they could do something with some charities, but then they saw RRP and decided that it was so onerous that they actually laughed about it. So I know that's a reflection on all of us, because that's the world that we live in, but it's a sad state of affairs that we can't cut firewood in Sooke anymore. So anyways.
Well, it's just, it's the reality of government, right? So yes, I agree. Councillor Loggins?
So could we amend the motion to say that that the disbursement of proceeds go to our grant?
Would you like to make that amendment,
Yes,
that they go to
please.
the community grant? Now, here's the question. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Parkinson. Will this increase the community grant budget, or will it just mean that we would get less from taxes?
No, as an increase. It's an increase. That's a good question.
Well, it could be,
but as an increase, not as a filler, as an increase.
Okay, so on that amendment, Councillor Raythan Pearson?
I don't have I think it's a great place for it to go, but I see this as for this coming year, 2018 only. I don't see this as an increase to that budget line long term. So.
Yeah. One time, okay. Councillor Pearson?
Well, I think that our original intent around this table was to send it to charity, and there's a lot of clubs and organizations that don't come through the community grant process, like Sooke Fastball, Sooke Softball, Sooke Soccer, Sooke Minor Sports of all types. You're always looking for something. So I prefer that it wouldn't go through the grant process, and it would be held in some kind of council charity thing, that when we get those special applications that we always get, late in the day, that we do it.
Okay, so we're still on the amendment. So are you proposing an amendment? I haven't even called the question on this amendment yet. We're discussing the amendment. Okay, so I'll call the question on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment? Opposed? Okay, so Councillor Pearson, Ray, Tate, and Parkinson have opposed the amendment. So it fails. So now the new amendment proposed by Councillor Pearson is that turn on your microphone.
So that the sale or the proceeds of anything that we get there be directed to a special council contingency fund to be used for in the intent of charity.
Okay.
Whether it's the food bank or whatever, but it's
So
just charity.
council direct the proceeds be directed to a special council charity fund.
Yes.
Special account dedicated to local charities.
Yes.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Loggins for discussion purposes. Councillor Loggins.
So how are we going to disperse these funds?
We'll figure that out at a later date.
Are we going to accept applications like we do with the Community Grants Fund? Or are we just going to expect people to come up here and ask for thousands of dollars? Will there be limits on it? We have to make sure that, I'm not saying this is a bad idea, I'm just saying that when it actually comes down to it, we'll have to do more work to figure out how we're going to disperse them, because it should be significantly smaller amounts of money than we give out with our community grants.
Councillor Pearson?
And I'm not, the idea is charities that don't necessarily go through the grant process. That's kind of my thought behind it. That's why I said that. Because there's, like I say, there's sometimes that we need uniforms. There's, what was the girls group that needed some kind of new uniform?
Oh, I could name a million of them.
Something like that came forward, and it was an extra $300. So this is just something that.
So is this saying that anyone who applies for a community grant is not eligible for this charity?
No, I don't want to get.
I think we need to just. Yeah, I think we need to see what we're going to get for it, and then we can come back to what our process looks like. But we do have groups that are ineligible for the grant program. Let's just figure that out at a later date. Well, I don't know. Okay, we'll figure it out. Direct the proceeds be added to the annual, well, what's going on with the, okay, that first amendment needs to go away. Direct the will be added, and can we, I think, staff, are you recognizing that we're going to need some help later on determining how we're going to deal with this?
Your Worship, yes.
Okay.
It's going to create additional work for staff. So it's just beware that out of the list of priorities we have already, this will be another one.
So perhaps what we can do, that's where I think the main motion is great, because then we can see what the proceeds are first before we see what is there. So I'm going to call the question on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment? Councillor Pearson and Parkinson. All those opposed? Councillor Loggins, Tate, and Ray are opposed. The amendment fails. So we're back on the main motion. I think we put the logs out for sale. This is government and fireworks. Government and firewood in action, and we'll have the logs sold, and then at a future date we can decide what we're going to do. Okay, so I'll call the question on the main motion. All those in favor? Opposed? Oh God, seriously? Councillor Loggins, Parkinson, and Pearson are opposed, so it fails. Seriously? Can someone make a different... Oh my God. I'm going to call that question again. Like, in the essence of time and moving on with business, well, we don't know what we're going to get for these logs. It's alder, and they've been sitting in the rain. So let's try this again. All those in favor of the main motion? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. Look at that. Thank you. We're moving on. It's getting late, obviously. We have important business still. Okay, Knox Centre Affordable Housing Project with the DCC charges. So we have a report here in front of us in regards to the Knox Church, and it was a... Sorry, my battery in my iPad has failed. We did hear from a speaker already today, and it was about, we have the permissive tax exemption. This recommendation is just to waive the development cost charges, but I believe the request was also to waive the development permit, building permit, and zoning fees, and then to consider a permissive tax exemption. Staff, please.
Thanks, Your Worship. It is noted, and thanks to Mr. Orr for bringing that to my attention, because I missed that in the letter, but I did have it at the bottom of the report that the building fees could also be waived, the part that aren't commercial anyway. So we don't know what the value of that is yet. We won't know that until the application comes in. And then the permissive tax exemption, it would just be part of the permissive tax exemption bylaw once there's an application from the applicant. That can't happen until there's an assessment and everything. So we can't determine that amount either right now. So all the report is able to show at this time is the DCC amounts. And then that's on the second page. And you can see the amount that can be waived is estimated right now at $171,000. And then council doesn't have the authority on the commercial part, similar to what happened with the Hope Center. So the DCCs would be paid, and then if council wanted, they could be granted back. So that additional amount is another $12,500. So. And then that's basically all the information we have at this point.
Okay, so this will take care of what we can do for now, but subsequent meetings then will receive reports on the other pieces as they come available.
Yes.
That's my,
yep,
okay?
That's correct.
Okay, Councillor Pearson, then Ray.
So I'll make the motion I'll make a motion that council approve this in principle so that the Knox can get on with their business, so that we approve it, and then and I don't know if the wording would be to follow the model that we used with the Hope Center. Mm-hmm. That's because I think we took care of that business at the time. So if we follow that same model, then Knox should get exactly what they're entitled to. So how's that?
Okay,
So to our corporate officers, that motion makes sense?
Yep, just give it.
Thank you.
Councillor Ray, are you prepared to second that? Yes. Okay, Councillor Ray is second that. Waive development, cost charges, permit fees.
Well, hang on, I need to ask a question before that.
Okay. Okay, and consider a property tax exemption. $2019? What do we do?
Through your worship, as noted in the report, it's too late to now provide any more exemptions for 2018.
For 2018, okay. So
and
we need
the Knox Church would need to make application next year prior to August 31st.
Okay.
For consideration of the 2019 bylaw.
Okay, now, Councillor Pearson, as the mover, did you want some language also in there that says, and that the process that was followed for the Hope Center, does that need to be in there?
Well, I think, I guess, yeah, the Hope Center model, whatever, because I think through to our corporate finance director, do you understand kind of what I'm saying there? Thank you.
Okay. Or does it need to be in there?
Oh, thanks. Your Worship, I'd just like to add I understand what what the recommendation is, so that's fine. The amount that council decides to waive, in addition, like the amount that is being granted back, that is in a sense a grant, so that is going to be coming out of general operations or development fees, wherever council wishes it to come out of. So.
I think we would just need your recommendation on where that would be the best part, and it would be whatever we did for the Hope Center. I don't recall where that came from at this time. Councillor Ray, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and that's my point as well. I believe that the community needs to have consistent decision making, and so I want to make sure that what we did for the Hope Center, we can do for the Knox Center. So.
Yeah. Okay. Good. All right. We're good? All those in... It's out of order.
It's just on the wording of your amendment. It's saying consider property tax exemption, which is not in keeping with what we've asked.
But I think we just need to get your application forward.
We don't have it yet, so that's what...
No, I know, but if we know that it's approved in principle, we can run our pro forma knowing that
Okay.
it's going to be upheld down the road.
Okay.
Get final funding for BC House.
Okay. Count to our corporate officer.
Yes, the property tax exemptions need to be approved in a bylaw. So, and that bylaw will not come forward to council until next year when all applications are received for 2019 moving forward. So council really couldn't definitively say today that they will endorse that fully without having the bylaw in front of them to approve.
If there's a reference to Hope Center, I think that will satisfy BC Housing.
Okay. Councillor Pearson.
That's why I chose the word principal, because I know that we can't do it in advance of that.
Okay, if you could just follow up with our corporate officer and any questions. If we need a letter to be sent, I'm sure I'd be happy to draft something, and that would satisfy that. Okay, Councillor Ray?
Yes, I don't think the motion captured the in principle piece.
It is. Permit fees in principle.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yes, the in principle is in the motion, and we have included the intent for the other model within the minutes, so that will be clear.
Okay, and if you need more, just contact our corporate officer, and we'll draft a letter, and I'll be more than happy to sign it if necessary, okay? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, 2080 Kaltasin Road, the Public Works Yard. Council had requested just an update on what the status of any prevailing leases in the Kaltasin Works Yard are. And we have one that's coming to conclusion, and then there's another that is in place. I'll just turn to our Director of Development Services just to clarify this report, please.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I believe that the report is self-explanatory, but I just want to pick up on the fact that last year there was an indication from the gentleman from Vic City Crane that he wanted to renew his lease for the small area where he has his truck and a couple of utility trailers parked. And unfortunately, staff was moving forward with his request, but it got lost in the shuffle, and it was never proceeded with. And he still is interested in obtaining a lease in the area that he currently holds in the what would be the northwest quadrant of the yard where he is now.
Okay.
All the other leases they don't exist. Main Road has an agreement within the Main Road overall maintenance contract for their area, so that's taken care of. The person that was in the office and the bays are supposed to be out as of tomorrow, and I will be checking on that. Hopefully he's out so I don't lose another bet. So if I'd be willing to take any questions.
Okay, Councillor Pearson, please.
Yes, and thank you for that, Director of Development Services. I don't look forward till tomorrow. But I do want to make a comment is that we've entered into an agreement. We've granted an extension, so the expectation is that that lease has come to an end. The other one, I guess the questions are out there or have been out there. How did it come to be, and how come it's still existing? Do we have to put an RFP out there for public space because it's a disposal of a public asset? That would be my question through to somebody in staff.
Oops. Sorry, go ahead. That was me.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Pearson, I really can't comment on the origin of Vic City Crane. There was a lease at one time, and it was formalized, and it expired in December of 2016, I believe it was. And that's the one that was going to be renewed. And it, as I said, it fell through the cracks and never came to fruition again. And as I said, he would really like to maintain that lease. How the original lease that expired in 2016 was formalized, I'm not sure. That was before my time. I hate to use that vernacular, but it was. So when I did my research, I never really did find anything that led up to that lease being procured. I hope I've answered your question.
Okay. Councillor Loggins?
I just wanted clarification because I think, if I recall, we asked for everyone to be out. So why would we allow one to stay in?
We asked just for one to be out. We weren't aware of the lease on the other. That's why the report has come forward. So it was the case of we needed our own bay back for the Parks Department. So that's where that existing lease was not renewed. And then it was the case of, well, where did this other one come from? So that's
right.
Why we had
I
this
think the
report.
intention of that, though, like the intention of vacating the other leases was to have the public works yard for the district only.
Yeah, I don't know. Councillor Ray?
But we do have an agreement with Main Road to also use that in their contract as well. So it isn't just one, there are two.
Yeah, Main Road we have to keep.
I guess, sorry, just to clarify what I'm saying, there's a lot of unanswered questions with this one, and I think it would be better to receive more information instead of a quick report. I guess something a bit more full that answers all of the questions.
What are you looking, like, I think that's where staff would like to know what more information do they need to provide?
I think in terms of the contract, how it did come up, and if there's any conflicts with the people who are leasing the yard. We don't know when they started. We don't know who they are, why it expired and they're still there, and I'd like more information on that.
Okay, Mr. Blackwell?
Yes, if I can add some background on this, because I was involved in the agreement for Vic City Crane, because they had approached our CAO at the time. I think this predates our current CAO. And then an agreement was done up and signed. And we researched what's the value of parking a vehicle of that size, and it was about $100 a month for a parking spot. So that's that's kind of what we landed on from the revenue side of things. To put together an RFP for a $100 parking spot is not worth staff's time, so it'd be better just to not do it at all. The reason the building is we're terminating that lease is we do need space in the bays, but the admin side of the building is not, it requires significant upgrades, more than the value of the lease, and it could be a lot more. We don't know. I think it's a lot more cost effective to just like either shut it down somehow or tear it down, because it's going to require a significant amount of upgrading, and that's what the current or former tenant was asking for, and we're, you know, it's not really a cost-effective thing to be doing. So
That's good. Okay, so Councillor Pearson.
We've kind of tried to take the sensitive issue around this out. We need to have a proper, whether it's an RFP that costs us something, we need to have a disposal of a public asset process in place. There's questions in the public about this process, how it came to be. There's questions that I've been asked, and I know other councillors have been asked, and it's out there, it's circulating around, and I want to try to be respectful to everybody that's there, because I think sometimes people start something with good intent and then it ends up afterwards being there. So I guess what I would ask for as a councillor is the transparency on the whole process. If we're going to be renting out a parking spot, then it should be offered to anybody that wants to do it, or it goes to a bid process. We've got to be careful with a situation like this, right? And anyways, there's some sensitivity around this, and I get it, but at the same time, it's come forward, so we've got to deal with it appropriately. So what's our purchasing policy or our disposal policy? And I think we have to stick to it.
Yeah, the agreement, I believe, if I can remember, was signed off by all the appropriate people. I don't know if it came in front of council. It sounds like it didn't. It's a pretty small dollar one, so it may not have been felt like it needed to come to council. And as far as the land hasn't been disposed. There's no disposal. There's a lease. We haven't disposed of anything. We haven't transferred any rights to the person renting the parking spot. So there's no disposal of any asset.
Okay. So, council to receive the report for information. Moved by Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor Parkinson. Thank you. Any further discussion on this? All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Pearson and Loggins are opposed. Is there something more that? Okay, if you need something further, just let me know. Okay. Do we need a motion to move past 11? Okay, can I have a motion to extend the meeting past 11 o'clock? I'd like to get through it because your next meeting agenda is very full too. Moved by Councillor Ray and seconded by... Is anyone going to second meeting past 11? Councillor...
I'll second it, but I'd like to have discussion.
Okay, it's been seconded for discussion. Go ahead, Councillor Pearson.
Several months back.
Microphone.
Several months back, I have no issue with when it's critical and things like that. Several months back, we passed a motion that we would always try to be respectful of time, and I get it. 3 public hearings tonight. We have no control over public hearings. Now it's 11 o'clock, and we all agreed in the room that we would try to end everything at 11 and that we wouldn't go forward. And I mean, I was a spoiler at one time, and I said I wouldn't do that ever again, that I wouldn't support a motion to go past 11, and I just supported it. So I guess I've gone back on my promise. But it's respectful of not only our time, but it's of our decision-making process. We're rushing decisions to get out of here as opposed to the quality that's going there. I'd much rather come for another meeting, and I know that's onerous for everybody, but I'd rather do that than I would go past 11 o'clock. I mean, we can't, we say, okay, well, it's 11:30 or it's 12 or it's 1 or it's 2. It doesn't really matter. But then all of a sudden we're rushing to get to that. I think we should set a time limit, and we all agreed to it as councillors. We were all in the room that we wouldn't do it anymore. And I respect that this is one of those things. Staff does a great job of putting agendas together, but this was too big tonight. At the end of the public hearings, there was some important business that had to be taken care of, and I'm kind of reading down here as I'm talking. Anyways.
Nope, I agree with you. Okay, call a question, though. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Parkinson, Loggins, and Pearson are opposed, so therefore, motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Councillor Pearson and seconded by Councillor Parkinson. All those in favor of adjournment? Opposed? Thank you, everyone, and good